Not forget about. All right, so I think we're live. Can anybody see us? Hello, everybody. Look at that.
On the November 18th one, or?
Look at the delay reaction. That's kind of cool.
No.
Did we check?
No.
That's neat. It's like one of those mirrors, only it's really slow. If I can get the speed right.
Can you turn around and say, hey,
Nice. Hey, Brett's there. Excellent.
There we go.
Fun with the video and delay. Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Brett.
How do you turn up the thing so you don't get the feedback? Do you have to turn up your volume?
You should turn off your microphone, and I will turn off my speaker. I think that does it.
Yeah, I muted microphone.
Okay. Maybe you have to mute your speaker. All right. All right. I'm going off the video here, so we'll just go with the straight. Cool. How's everybody doing? It's been a little while. We're getting towards the end of the semester, right? How's our data collection? Who's done? Okay. Well done, Toby. Your questions are good, yes.
So I have my data
Mm-hmm.
that I'm collecting now, but I unfortunately, because I didn't start at the beginning of the year, didn't know my classes when I started collecting my data. And I unfortunately have, my control group is my high and low class, and they're like way higher and lower.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other class, my other two classes, experimental, are both like in the middle together, but one class is twice as big as the other, so I can't really use the two of them with each other anyway. And I have to start all my data collection over. My question is, since like
Don't start your data collection over.
can I just use
That's
the
my
data that I
advice.
collected last year when my classes were even and I like did a test run? I ended up doing it the exact same way.
You can definitely include both. The problem with last year is because you probably didn't have any consent with those kids.
I have those two together.
Yeah, I guess that would work. But I wouldn't worry about the data not coming out right. I think it's okay. I think the best advice is just to go with what you got, and then you explain. Excellent.
You say I have a dream.
And then you. I had a dream. No. I mean, all of our studies aren't going to work the way we wanted them to, right? That's just the way it goes in action research, especially the first time you do it. And so, don't just because you're not getting the answer you thought, don't start over, because that's okay. You're doing the project. You're doing the and you can explain why you didn't get an answer at the end. That is your goal, right? Figure out what you've got and then explain it. Exactly. Right. I mean, it is a huge thing, and there's so many variables that we cannot control that we know it's going to go haywire a certain percentage of the time. And if that is you, that is you. And don't lose sleep over it. Right? You're doing your project as best as it works, and you get what you get.
That makes my eyes twitch. I don't know if I can.
It's going through some things.
I'm like, I don't know if I can handle that. I'm pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So look at all the stuff we did. Oh, crazy semester. So we did all kinds of cool stuff, and you have grades on a few things, not as many as you want, I'm sure. But those are coming a little bit at a time. But now we're pretty much going to talk about the end of the year. So are you all getting my emails?
No. I don't know your email.
I've been emailing fairly regularly to your CSUN accounts. All right, you've got to check your CSUN account. It is required that you check your CSUN account. If you get disenrolled for some reason, they will send you an email on your CSEL account. You need to like forward that to someplace you're actually going to check. You don't have to actually get into CSEL every day, but make sure you're getting those messages. All right. So the message that I sent out last week. Anybody remember?
Yeah.
Few of you guys.
That we weren't doing
All right.
that.
Nobody asked me any questions, so that really concerned me because there was a lot of stuff in that email. There was stuff about the readings because we had a couple of readings since we last met, and limited number of people had replied to about those readings, and I don't know, maybe a lot of people posted today, so maybe that's good, or then many people still have work to do. So there's a couple of readings, and then we have 2 final assignments in this class. And unfortunately, we just because of the missing weeks, we're dumping both assignments on you simultaneously. One is due in a couple of weeks. The other one is due in about a month. And so we've got that. And so if you didn't get the email, you get to find that all out today. Cool. All right. So let's first just review real quickly what was assigned. Right. So the last time we met, we talked about the situated cognition, and Lave and Wenger, and the communities of practice and apprenticeship and all that fun stuff. Right. But then we said, okay, well, we've got to figure out how we do this in a classroom. Right. So then we had some readings about something called cognitive apprenticeship. So apprenticing in a field that is mostly cognitive, that is not being a tailor, that is not being a butcher, where you can just see what people are doing, but things that are cognitive, right? So we had some readings about that. So you're going to either read the BCD or the CBH, right? So we had those, and somebody was going to report on those. Does anybody remember who? Does anybody? Excellent, awesome. All right, cool. We'll get to that very soon, right? And then the next thing was that we didn't have this class, so we got to think about it. And we also got to read, and there was a reading in the Teaching Science for Social Justice. You could either read from this textbook, which is linked on here, or read this paper here. How many people read the textbook? It's not a textbook. Why am I saying it? It's a book. Yeah, chapter 2 from that book has sort of a case study in it. So you read it? Thank you.
I thought we were supposed to either read or go to the talk.
Oh.
Did I misunderstand?
Yeah, totally. You were supposed to either go to the talk or watch this video of John Seeley Brown, and then everybody was supposed to read. So we'll do a little bit of reading today because you need to know at least part of that paper in order to participate today. And so we'll talk about those. I don't think anyone was summarizing either of those. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Cool. All right, well that's okay. They're fun papers, and we can play around with them today. And then okay, so now there's 2 assignments, right? Okay, so the last assignment was in last week when we did not meet. It was this idea of a communities of practice paper. So we read all about communities of practice, and so now I want you to write about communities of practice. And so the assignment is here. Let's see. It's not helping at all. All right, maybe a little bit. All right. So the idea here is to either describe a community practice at your school, or it could be outside of school too. It doesn't have to be at school. So some community practice that you're familiar with, or make up a hypothetical community practice. Like, what could your school do to build a community? What kind of community could get created after school, during school, something else? Yeah.
Could it possibly be for the community, could it be like my science department, like a work community?
Like a community of teachers?
Yeah.
Sure.
Like
or a professional learning community, as the lingo goes, right? You're a PLC. Sure, that's a great community. Yeah.
In terms of this community, if we look at just our classroom as a whole as a community, because I was thinking about this in what we do in the classroom and like what kids participate in or don't participate in.
Mm-hmm.
But if our class as a whole is a community and the kids that are actual participants buy into the class and do all the different things, and there are the other ones that haven't really bought into the class or they're not participating?
The peripheral participants, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is our class, just our class in general an okay example?
Yeah, you could talk about your class as a community, sure. I mean, what community, you're supposed to have practices that you're all engaged in.
Yeah.
That's certainly true of your classroom. They have assignments that they need to do and things, and you've got some norms set up for your class on how people are supposed to behave. They don't always do that necessarily.
I was just gonna say, can I use my football program? It's not like a science.
Totally, yeah, cool. So so I've got a couple of examples from the last cohort. By the way, I cut down the words thing. One of the feedback that I got last time I taught this is that the papers were too long and they ran out of things to say. So I've cut it down a little bit. So, and you'll notice that people are a little bit redundant. I mean, people stretched their things. All right, so I've got a couple of samples here, and we'll just do a real quick look, and you can check these out in more detail later. Let's see here. I certainly hope so. Yeah, no, they were good ones. Cool, and I don't know if remember if I took their names off or not. Did I? Maybe I did. Oh, good for me. All right, cool. So high school chemistry, a community practice. So just like you're saying, like a community of a classroom. Oh, I remember who did this. All right, cool. So yeah, so it talks about a little bit about the readings and what was that, and a description of this part's about not necessary. So she goes into a detail about what a community practice is. That's great if you want to do that. Not necessary. And then it talks about the practices in her classroom, right? So the community and some of the practices that they do, and she's got some reference. She actually read one of the other Wenger papers, I think. And then she talks about the cognitive apprenticeship stuff as well, and lots of examples from her class. Cool. And so you can see. So that was a 7-pager. So that was the long version, as I mentioned. The other paper here takes a very different tack. So that was one that was about a classroom. This one is. Oh no, I thought I picked a different one. All right, that's okay. I must have had some problem with the other one. So this one is, what was this one? Oh, okay, cool. The science club. Cool. So a science club at the school. So not part of the classroom, but sort of an outside the classroom kind of a thing, as you can see. So some of the stuff that they did as a club, and how it was, making them a community and how people participated. So you can see lots of examples about that. And one of the things I told people, because they were all complaining, it's like, this paper's too long, I said, just go into more detail about about the community, because you can always talk about a community. So now I said it has to be 1,000 words, something like that.
It's like 3 pages, what is that?
It's like 5,
5?
depending on your font. Yeah. Cool. Cool. So, there's a real brief outline that you can look at on the assignment page. So if you go to where it says Communities of Practice paper, that's always where you get your details on the assignment. And it says these are the 5 parts that you want to have in your paper. Describe the context, describe the community, the types of practices, norms and behaviors, and the last part is this process that they talk about in the book. How do you go from being a peripheral person to being more of a core person, if that happens?
Can we just make those our headings?
Sure.
I mean,
Always a good idea. Yeah. So there you go. So that gives you sort of the basic idea of it and some examples to look at in the past. You're probably going to want to cite the Levin Wenger paper. You may want to cite some other things. We're going to use APA formatting in that. So for the citations, I don't need APA formatting for all the details about the headings and stuff like that. But try to keep your citations within the format. You guys,
How many citations do you think we should have?
at least one. How's that? Yeah, no, like I said, it's not a research paper. This is primarily your thing, but bringing in the readings from class is a good idea. Do you guys know this trick? You do this all the time. You go to Google Scholar. Let's say you've got some paper and you want to get the APA formatting, and you don't want to have to figure out what the formatting is supposed to be, and it takes too long. all you do is you go to Google Scholar and you look it up. And so like you look up wave and finger, right? It comes up with, hey, situated learning, blah, 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 blah. And that's the textbook. So you're like, okay, that's the one. And I want to get the citation. So I click on this little button here that says cite.
Where were you last semester?
Exactly. And so you click on APA and you do copy and you go to your paper and you do paste. It's like, boom, I love that. My favorite thing.
Another thing you can do is, if you type certain specific things into Google Scholar, sometimes you don't get a lot of hits.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually, if you can go and you can find it through whatever it is, then if you find exactly what it's called and whatever, oftentimes that's actually in Google Scholar, it's just not formatted right. So
Right.
it pops up.
Yeah. Sometimes the names come up weird, like that. The Barton book. If you read that chapter 2 of the Barton book, it's Angela Barton with, and then she names like 4 other people, and you're like, well, what are you supposed to do with those names and stuff? So I wasn't even sure. So I looked it up on Google Scholar, and they just have her name. I don't know what she was thinking with that, but anyway, they didn't get credit. The other thing that's great on Google Scholar is this cited by. This thing where you can find everybody who also likes this paper and has cited it in their paper or hates it. I guess you'd have to cite it anyway if you hated it. So you can look and see who's doing similar type stuff, and it's all the newer stuff, right? So it's everything that's come out since then that cites that thing. So that cited by is a really useful tool for finding references. Y'all didn't do Google Scholar last semester? A little bit? Oh. Yeah, Google Scholar is good. The downside of Google Scholar is you don't often get the actual article, right? Usually it's just a link to a page, like the abstract and stuff. Occasionally you get it. If you see PDF here, that means you can get it most of the time, but not always. Yeah.
So the cited, that's published paper? Or is it just kind of like if they
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, it's published papers. Sometimes you'll see reports, which are not technically published.
So when then you click on, the one that's like cited by over 40,000.
Yeah, look at that, 45,000. Oh, that's our book. This is a different book. Oh yeah, that's their other book. Why do they have 2 books in the same year? Oh, that was Wenger and Lave, and that's Lave and Wenger. So that's cited by 45,000 people. See, I told you that was a popular book, and now you all know it. You're in the club. Yeah, so yeah, it also gives you a pretty good sense of the relative importance of that paper in the community, right? If something's important, it gets cited a lot. And you can.
Why is it so important? I mean,
Why is that book? You didn't. It didn't strike you as.
No, I didn't think it was revolutionary in any way. Maybe I'm dense. Can you tell me why?
I think the education research before then was very much like control group, experimental group result, right? And this is a very different way to think about education, right? We're going to do this sort of anthropological approach, and we're going to look at it in terms of structures and groups and social networks and things like that.
So, yeah, I can definitely see being relevant, especially now. And I think it would be relevant in like, what is it, disproving everything that everybody else is saying. Where it's like, oh, you need to be more immersed, you need to have the students involved. And then I think they probably just like sprinkle in the name.
I don't. So.
I
mean, so it's kind of funny because it's almost like a full circle, isn't it?
Full circle to.
Maybe I'm mixing up with other things in terms of apprenticeship type of thing.
Okay.
You know, here we are. Back in the day, people were always in the factories doing stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the schooling, which was kind of factory model, but you had this very formal learning, which was seen as advancement.
Right.
And now there's this full circle. It's like, well, let's go back to this idea of apprenticeship aspect, because formal schooling doesn't seem to really have deep learning. Does that make sense? So it's a kind of like this. Is that? Am I getting things mixed up with other?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think there's certain dissatisfaction with school and how effective schools are and why a lot of people are not succeeding in school and trying to look for what are some other models.
Well, so you're going back to the egg, right?
Yeah, my guess is they were sort of thinking about, well, what's missing in schools? Why are schools different? why are schools unhappy and saying, well, it's not like it used to be, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that, but I don't know. So you didn't think that's useful? You think we should
No,
stick with the
it's kind
factory
of,
model?
it's
or?
like education. It's always about the pendulum swinging back and forth,
Yeah.
back and forth, and that gets
Yeah,
me upset.
definitely.
It gets me upset. No, it does, because it's like, oh yeah, here's a solution, Common Core. Oh, sorry, that doesn't work. Let's do something else. Oh, let's, it's just, to me, it's like, in this book, it's that too. It's like, oh, the schooling doesn't work, so let's go back to apprenticeship, because that is much more effective. And so I'm just, to me, kind of like, here we go again. No, yeah, here's another ride.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work, so let's go back again. So that's what I'm saying. Pendulum swinging.
Absolutely.
Bathwater type of approach in education.
That's definitely true in terms of the policy. That the policy seems to swing wildly back and forth. But it's good to know what the sides of the pendulum are, right? So you can say, oh yeah, I know where this is going. That's going to that apprenticeship type stuff, and then eventually it'll go back to more of whatever the other side is.
So
that's kind of what we're supposed to learn in this program.
yeah, so then there is never going to be a correct answer, is there? If you keep on going back and forth, it means that there is no correct answer. Because if there was a correct answer, then you wouldn't go back and forth.
That's a very relativist conclusion.
Well, what do you mean?
That there is no correct answer? There's no good way to teach?
Well, they're saying that, wait, teach this way. No, it doesn't work. Teach that way. No, it doesn't work. So
I think maybe the solution is that not one solution fits for every situation.
well, but education policy makes it sound like this is the solution. Do it. Everybody do it.
Now, as a researcher, I don't want to be sort of stuck with the policy decisions that people that are in the policy world make, because that's not necessarily what the research said to do. So I feel like that wasn't our fault, if I speak for researchers. But I can understand how, as a teacher, it certainly feels like that some piece of research comes out and then people glom onto that, and all of a sudden everything starts changing. Definitely. Cool. All right. Well, we have a lot we got to do today, so I don't want to get too stuck on this, but that's an important point, and definitely something to think about when you're writing your communities of practice paper, and what does that mean? Or it's not the solution. Maybe they don't work. Exactly. All right. So questions about this assignment, and then I want to jump into the reading, and then we'll talk about the final assignment later in class today. So are we good about this one? When's it due?
I mean, it seems long. When is it due?
December 1st. Yeah. So it's not meant to be, you're not supposed to go out and do a lot of research. This is supposed to be something that you're reflecting on the readings, and then you're able to pretty much just knock out. So hopefully that 2 weeks is enough time for that, if you didn't get to hear about it till today.
Yeah.
Hope so. And then that'll give us a couple more weeks to do the final project, which should be fun, I hope. Okay. All right. So let's get into cognitive apprenticeship and talk about that one a little bit. So we had our 2 cognitive apprenticeship papers. All right. Oh, interesting. It's a little bit different. So, wait, what happened to my other one? That was weird. Yeah, all right, so who would like to start on this? All right, there. All right, whatever. Cool. Okay, very good. Yeah, I know, it was a little while ago. Now, which one were you looking at?
You know what? I'm trying to figure out which one I looked at, because they're really similar.
They are very
I
similar.
think it was the one calling down in Poland.
Okay.
That was the one that I did. It is, yeah, okay.
All right. Well, let's start with that anyway, because apparently that one's been done.
Yeah, no, I'm looking through, it has the math and writing and reading examples.
Yeah.
Yeah, they use similar examples in both of them.
Okay,
Right.
maybe I'll do a little bit, you do a little bit. Okay,
Okay, cool.
okay. So essentially, he's talking about cognitive apprenticeship, and how it incorporates aspects of normal apprenticeship that we looked at last week, or well, a few weeks ago, and then modern school formatting, and how when you are in a cognitive apprenticeship, it's the teacher's job to make the thinking visible, because in a normal apprenticeship, the students can see what's going on. And it's, let's see what else. So they gave 3 examples. They gave a writing example, a math example, and a reading example. And they had these kind of steps. There's a nice outline, much further down.
Okay.
Like all the way.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about this
Okay.
section just a little bit here. So the idea is, so they want to make this transition between the apprenticeship world and then to this world where we're doing academic work, and they want to sort of see. So, so what do you got to do? How do you do apprenticeship in academia or in cognitive domains? So you mentioned the making thinking visible, right? That's one of the key ideas, right?
So there's a couple of things that a master of the subject would need to share with their apprentice. And one of them is like the factual stuff, the domain knowledge, like what little pieces do they need to know before they can do any critical thinking. Then they have like heuristic strategies, or those little algorithms that we do, or little strategies that we do ourselves, sometimes without thinking, but we have to share the little pieces with the kids so that they'll have that toolbox of things to use in our subject. And then there's something called control strategies, which is like how do we select which method to use when we are using, so which one of our heuristic strategies do we use, which one's appropriate, and then how do we learn new information in our subject. So it's how we do that, and a lot of it, I think they were talking about modeling, just like walk the kids through like every little part that you do, and then have them practice it so that you can hear what they're thinking, so that you can help them along the way.
How many people have heard somebody who's a really bad lecturer? Okay, yeah. So you're familiar with this concept. What are some of the mistakes people do?
Too fast.
They go too fast.
Yeah.
They assume they say things and they don't explain what they are, and the audience that can't follow what they're doing, right?
They read from their notes.
They're really boring, right? They're reading from the notes.
You know, I always thought the best teachers were the ones that struggled the most in school, because they knew every little glitch. Like, it's usually the PhDs that can't teach whatsoever, the ones that are really good at their subject, right? Because there's so many leaps they do that they assume that you're following along. But people who, you know, maybe struggled in biology and understand that, I remember when I had troubles, and so you can think of it this way. So,
yeah, I mean that we've all seen that. People who get so good at something that they don't even know what they're doing anymore, right?
Not just that, but then there might be a narrow focus based on their thesis that they wrote 30 years ago when it was relevant.
Yeah. Like they force you to talk about simulations all semesters. It's terrible. Yes, totally. But to go back to this point about knowing too much to be able to explain it, right? Last year you guys did the How People Learn book, right? What was the sort of thing that happens when you learn something really well?
You learn how to make the connections, and you know how to categorize them.
Right, so you get your structure, you got all your mental structures all organized and everything. And what do you do with your processes?
chunky.
Yeah, you do this thing called chunking, right? That's where you take this complicated thing and then you think about it in your mind, it's all one thing, and you kind of automate it, right? At that point, you can't explain it, right? Because you don't even think about it anymore. It's just an automatic thing. You can't explain it if you really force yourself to. But a lot of people have trouble with that. And so that they don't give all the little steps. And students, of course, don't have that chunk in their brain, so they can't follow along, right?
Sometimes I notice myself, whenever I teach a subject, I learn more and more all the time. And so I want to share it with them.
Yeah.
And then I have to realize that, like, it's for me, years and years of, like, learning this and all these other subjects that they're not going to understand it right away. They may not, like, I'll share it with them, but I won't expect them to, like, fully understand it the same way I do. You know?
Right.
Sometimes it's, like, too much.
They can't make those same leaps that you do, for sure. Yeah. So so knowing your audience, of course, and being able to explain it in a way that the audience is going to understand, and not skip those little details that are really essential that we all skip all the time. Like, you talk about, we were talking a couple weeks ago about the idea of a book on the table and how there's a normal force on the book, and just think that that the table is solid and that you can't push it down. I mean, that's such an obvious thing that we would never even think to explain it, and yet some kids don't have that. And so if you don't say it, they get started off on the wrong thing, and they get behind and confused and angry and all those things, right? So there's those seemingly obvious details that we don't want to have to waste time explaining. You have to waste time explaining, and it's not a waste. But part of that is knowing your audience and being able to find out what they need and that. Okay, so do we capture all the things that we wanted to say about that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean,
yeah.
there are a couple extra vocab terms thrown in there, like coaching and scaffolding, that you would eventually remove the scaffolding so that they could go into what the topic themselves. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, John Wooden's arguably one of the best coaches to coach anything ever. And he taught his guys how to put on their socks. Literally just what these are for, how to put on your shoe, how to lace your shoe, tie your shoe. My question is, I think we relate this as teachers to putting your name on the paper. And I still can't believe how many juniors and seniors still forget their name or proper heading, whatever we relate to. So my question is, how, as a teacher, as a professional, at what point do you say, okay, because I felt really bad today, putting a 0 because there was no name. But then it's they're a kid, so at what point do you keep teaching, put your name on everything?
Yeah.
And at what point do you say you're supposed to know this?
Right.
What's the professional response?
I don't have an answer for that. I think we battle that at every level of teaching, right? I think I'm going to get off topic again. I'm on the grievance committee for the university this year, and so we had a grievance about a graduate student in a different department, and they didn't understand that when the teacher said that this is a draft of your lit review, that meant you were supposed to rewrite your lit review and include it in your final paper. That seems the teacher thought that was obvious, but didn't actually say it out loud in class. And the student was like, oh, what do you mean we needed a lit review? We did that already. So anyway, so the same kind of thing happens. And the teacher in that case just basically failed them, and this was a straight A student, and they freaked out. I guess they weren't quite a straight A student. So they didn't know that. But yeah, it was some kind of language thing too. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that happens all the time at every level, that there's always these things that you think people ought to know, and they don't, but then you've got to decide, what are you going to do with that? Is this going to be a learning moment? If I give them a 0, will that sink in, or will that make them stop paying attention in class?
I think there's a pattern of that, and I think it's legitimate. Right?
I mean,
the same person forgetting to put their name on, and I think you can slam them after.
You can definitely justify both, right? I don't think either one is illegitimate.
I take up a little bit of credit for 5 points.
So, but and Wooden's point is that if you get the little things wrong, you can't get the big things right. So that you've got to make sure you get it right all along, and not because it was all that important that you tie your shoes right, but they didn't want you worrying about things and getting messed up by little things. I think that's what Wooden said. I'm not an expert.
It's actually a transition to Bill Walsh. It was if you do the little things right, the big things will come.
That sounds right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's look at some of these examples in this paper, the cognitive apprenticeship. So reading, writing, and mathematics. What's which one's first? The reading, right? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. The reciprocal teaching. I'll let you.
Sorry, I had to write that one on more. Okay, so they had a reading success story where they taught students how to ask questions based on the text. So they would read through the text, and as they were reading, they were kind of in this small group setting. And the teacher would say, okay, what questions can we ask, or can we summarize, or can we make a prediction, or clarify any difficulties with the text? And so as the teacher was going through, they were making their process of reading for understanding visible to the students, and then asking the students to kind of do the same thing as they were going through.
Yeah, exactly. Now, did you get from this little snippet, what reciprocal teaching is like a little bit? You could do some if you want. It's kind of painful.
Socratic, it's just like the teacher's leading them through questions.
Yeah, and it really illustrates the idea of scaffolding. So what happens is the first time the teacher does it all. They read a sentence and then they say, oh, what do I know about this sentence? I'm thinking this, and what do I think is going to come back? I think the next sentence is probably going to be about blank, and what's the vocabulary words that are hard in this sentence? This means this and that, and so then they do it. Then they start asking the students to do that, right? And then the students start having. Then you assign a student to each role, right? So somebody is the questioner, and somebody is the summarizer, and somebody is the predictor, right? So they can do all the parts. And then maybe you don't have to stop on every sentence. Maybe you can do a paragraph, and then you can summarize that. And you can let students go a little bit more as they start getting better at it. So that's the idea. But the first time you do it, it takes like the whole class period to read one page. I mean, you just go really slowly through it. And it's painful for somebody who's a good reader, right? So the good readers are just like, but that's part of the thing is, right, you've got everybody in your class is in different levels. They're gonna
I feel like it's really difficult to like define what a good reader is, and if reading 1 page an hour is really the best thing that people would actually do. I remember we did a PD and the English teacher we did it, and it was like about reading in context, or just kind of reading. I forgot. My section of reading. And she just was talking about how she's such a wonderful reader, but she realizes she's probably not like the best reader because she skips over so many details. And so when you said like, even though people are good readers, like how do you know if they're a good reader because they score high on reading tests, or because they're able to understand the main idea, or like if we're really dissecting for details, is the main idea like not that relevant.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a reading expert. I mean, how many of you teach some amount of reading? You spend some time talking about how to read in your class. A lot of people do that. Yeah. What are some tricks that you give people? What do you?
I tell them to look at those section headers.
Section headers? Yeah.
There's an activity I've done where they have to summarize, and I give them a specific number of words, and then. I mean, it's not so much the number of words that matters, but then you narrow it down, and so they actually have to be very careful what words they use to summarize. I don't know, that's not necessarily.
So like how much would they have to be reading? Like a page or something?
A page or a paragraph, but what it does is have them find those main points. I mean, if that's the purpose is the main point, which I guess goes back to kind of Gloria's saying, like, are you looking for main points, or are you looking for details, or what is the purpose of the reading for that to be effective, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly an important thing, for sure.
They have them, if they read a section and then they have to imagine that they're being writing a test question about it so that it's, and answer it. And so it shouldn't be something that's like obscure, like, would you want me to ask you, like, one tiny detail on there or something, big idea.
Right.
Sometimes, depending on the assignment, you assign sort of the bold print method where they just kind of go through with the bold print and go, do I know anything about that? You know, and I feel like I know a lot about that. I'm going to skip that and look at the next thing, and then I'll be back after it's done. You know, what's there.
Yeah, that's kind of like with the section headers, like trying to get a sense of what you think is going to be in there, right? And what do you expect in that. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of how we read, right? We look to see what kind of paper is this? What do I want to get out of it? You know, what am I looking for? Yeah, we rarely ever read just without any idea what we're reading. That doesn't happen very often. Yeah, but kids will do that all the time because they don't know.
Yeah. I know in my class we spend a lot of time reading word problems, and some of the most challenging ones for like my AP kids is when they have an entire lab situation described to them, and there's like 7 different numbers in there, and they need to use particular ones for each part of the function. And so it's finding like, well, what applies to what situation, and like what's actually actually happening in this described situation? I didn't draw you a diagram. Maybe we should draw a diagram first. And so I do that modeling technique
Yeah,
a lot.
that's a good
I just walk through every question I ask myself when I'm attacking something.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's that. Summarizing it, drawing a diagram, other ways of sort of getting them to create their own thinking of what's in that text. Yeah.
I actually had a thing happen today which was interesting in a totally informal setting. I had like 4 kids who've been hanging out in my room during lunch this week. And one of them, they're talking to each other, they were talking to me, one of them says, I still don't understand what we're supposed to do with Punnett squares. And of course, you hear what the kids are talking about, you try to mind your own business. But I'm like, really? So I was like, okay, come here, let's draw this one, let's do it. And we do it, and we walk through it, and same thing I've said in class many times, but just since it was one-on-one, she's like, that makes total sense. Why was I confused? I'm like, I don't know. But it was just, yeah, it was just the informal kind of, I guess, one-on-one. There's no stress here, I'm just hanging out.
Yeah, that can definitely help for sure. Yeah. Cool. All right. So the reciprocal teaching is a good example of how you do this. So you model things for the students. You have this activity structure that scaffolds them through the process, so walks them through the process, and then you slowly kind of fade that and let them read more on their own. Right. So that's sort of the big idea of cognitive apprenticeship. You model by making thinking visible and the process visible, and then you scaffold and then you fade it. Yeah.
How is that any different than, I forget the name for it, but it's like the 4 groups thing, like you all become an expert on something? Where it's like, okay, like you let's just say you read, there's 4 sections, so then like, you read section 1, you guys read section 2, you know.
It's like a jigsaw thing?
Well, I guess that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't it the same thing? Because then what happens is then you go back to your group and then you're kind of an expert on it, and you are summarizing and you're doing everything with someone teaching.
Yeah, I mean that's a good activity. I think that's a little different in that I don't know that there's a particular. I mean, what kind of a thing are you learning to do there? You're just sort of learning to learn something and explain it.
Because reciprocal teaching, more or less, the simpleton term would be the student becomes the teacher. It's flipped essentially.
Kind of, but I mean the steps are really important, right? So basically, what they did is they broke down what do we do when we read. What are those things that we do automatically that we have chunked as part of our skill of reading that we can break down for the students and explain to them the part about, understanding the vocabulary, anticipating what's going to come next, being able to sort of get the main idea of each thing. So those are sort of really key to reading, right? So if there was something in the jigsaw where you had some particular skills where you had broken down some complex thing into something simpler, then I think it would be the same idea. But it's not just kids being teachers. It's the way that they've broken down and made reading visible, right? That's the idea. And so then let's move on to writing. So we'll see a similar idea. The Scardamalian Baryter group is man, those people were so far ahead of their time. It's crazy. They were doing collaborative documents in the 80s.
Wow.
Before the internet. They had set up this was up in Toronto, and they'd set up this school with a local area network for the school, and they had a server, and everybody did a document, and they posted it to the server, and they could share it with their friends and see it. I mean, it was amazing what they came up with, and nobody was even thinking about that at the time. So it was really cool. So anyway, but besides that, they were also really interested in helping people write, and that's what this part is about. Cool. Are you gonna? Either one of you want to explain a little bit about this?
My notes for this
Quickly.
part, which I totally remember from weeks ago when I read this. I highlighted the part that says, when given a topic to write on, they immediately produce text by writing their first idea, then their next idea, and so on until they run out of ideas. I see my kids do this all the time when they write their lab reports. It's like their first 4 sentences suck, and then all of a sudden everything makes sense because they're like, oh, this is what I really think. And so it's just like, it's like, that's okay as long as you go back and edit what's going on, because as you write, you're really just organizing your brain. And so I thought that was kind of cool that they could say, like, now that we're past that part and you understand that this is for doing that, now we can move to a more advanced kind of writing where you plan what you're gonna say first and you can organize it together, and then what you say is going to make so much more sense. And so modeling that process for them, I think, was really helpful for improving their students' writing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we all can get better when we do that with writing, no doubt.
The next page has got like cues for opinion essays. I thought it was a really good idea to give your kids like sentence starters, because it can help them organize what they're trying to say before that, and can make their words a little bit more.
Right, and that was kind of like what you were talking about before, that control, right? Having that sentence structure helps me sort of get a direction to my thoughts, right? Uh-oh. Did we lose another?
Is it okay? Yes.
Okay. Do you want another seat?
I'm fine.
Okay.
We can start it. It's pretty simple.
Cool. So as an expert writer has all these sort of idea sentence structures in their head, and they can immediately pull one out that makes sense. Whereas students, they'll almost always start things the same way, right? They'll always do the same kind of sentence all the time, and they can't think of different ideas. So having those is really useful. I mean, you know, I think at one point I just put these on my wall after I read this paper in class a long time ago. But yeah, useful stuff. And then then there was what was the other thing? The other kind of scaffolding they did after they wrote?
After they wrote.
Yeah. Oh yeah, then they did the thinking aloud.
Was this the paper that had peer editing in it?
No, maybe. I mean, that was one of the things that they did with their online system.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but the like Rebus, like last year when we said like kind of pulling back the curtain relative to like the Mr. Oz analogy, I find that like when we do think out loud to the kids, especially in high school, that actually makes a lot of sense. You know, because I think what's really kind of funny is when the teachers, like play dumb. You know, it's like, okay, like, well, what happens next? And like, well, what if we did this? And then if you take the dumb factor like off of it, then they get they get all the rewards of being the hero with none of being the loser, so to speak. So it's like, okay, well, you know, what happens if like the liver produces erythropoietin? And the kid's like, well, wait a minute, isn't that the kidneys? And it's like, oh yeah, it is. And like, well, what do you think? And then you do that, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, so let's just say the kidneys produce erythropoietin. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, then what happens next? Like, what does it do? And then all of a sudden it's like, you by slipping up and playing stupid, like all of a sudden as you start to think a lot, like, well, why can't the liver produce erythropoietin? Oh, yeah. It's like these glands, where are those glands found? So I think that's one of like the best things to do.
Yeah, the teacher playing dumb, that can be really useful.
As long as you don't do it every day.
What was there's like this kids book that's all based on that. It's like My Weird School, and it's a whole series of books, but it starts off with the teacher going in the first day of class saying, I don't know how to do any math. Can somebody teach me? Right, and then the whole class has to teach how to do math. That's cool. It's really cute.
What's the series called?
I think it's called My Weird School. It's like something you read in like first grade or something.
Is it not advisable for high school then?
Hopefully it will be at a level that's they can do. The font is really big too. All right, how about the mathematical problem solving one? This is getting a little closer to science.
It was hard to follow.
Oh, okay.
Well, scroll down. There's like the mathy part, and I was like, what is going on? But so essentially, if this is the modeling, scaffolding, creating, coaching type of situation again, but for math, and so they followed. Is it Schoenfeld?
Schoenfeld, yeah.
Schoenfeld and Feld, and he essentially said that there are certain kind of strategies that you have. So there's heuristic strategies where you're teaching the learner how to learn for themselves, and then there's these control strategies for making for decision making as you're going through the problem solving phase. And so what the teacher does is they do I think it's like a think aloud or something like that. So as they're solving this problem,
Right.
they do a think aloud. And so the idea is that you start with one problem, you start with some simple problems that you know how to solve that are related to the more complex problem, and you do a few simple problems and you look for patterns in the simple problems, and then from those patterns you should be able to extrapolate a generalization, like a general rule, and then you can use that to solve the harder problem. And so that was kind of what he was going through in the example, I think. And then they work in small groups. And he was a big proponent for small group work so that the students could be thinking aloud with each other, so they're not quite as intimidated with the teacher sitting there staring over them. And they solve problems, and he suggests that they look for harder problems to solve, and then that way, as a group, they can figure it out by solving the simpler ones.
Yeah. He has a I think it's a pretty famous class, at least at Berkeley. Which is for math majors, but it's how to solve it. It's all about problem-solving techniques. And he does a number of things that are really interesting in that. One of the things that he does is when people are solving problems, he will periodically make them all stop and explain what they're doing, right? And why they're doing it. So like, what are you doing right now? Well, I'm trying to simplify this polynomial or something like that. And why do you want to do that? Well, because then I can get, this variable. I can see what this variable is, and then plug that into something else. So you had to be able to explain your reasoning for why you were doing what you were doing. And he would just interrupt people, and so they would expect that, so that they wouldn't do something if they didn't have a reason for doing it. They'd be like, oh, he's going to stop me and ask, so I better start thinking about planning ahead what I'm going to say. So then they would start being really thoughtful about their problem solving. Right. So then they started sort of planning their problem solving because they knew they were going to have to answer what they were doing. They couldn't just sort of goof around or explore the problem. Did I show you the graphs of the problem solvings? I feel like I've showed this before, but it might have been to a different class. I think I can pull it up in a second. The other thing that he would always do that would also drive the students just absolutely crazy. All right, so if I just look up images, I'm pretty sure this will come up. Here we go. Okay, so, all right, I have no idea what page this is, but it has the picture I want. Okay, so what they did is they were doing one of these think aloud things where they asked kids what they were doing when they were solving a problem and why they were doing it. And so this is one of the kids, and this is what they did. They read the problem, and then they explored. They had really no plan for what they're doing. And then this was an example of what an expert would do with a problem. They would read the problem, they'd start analyzing it, they'd explore a little bit, they'd go back and analyze some more, they'd explore some more, they would do some planning, and then finally they'd check. Right. So with an expert, this is that idea of being in control and knowing why you're doing what you're doing and how you make decisions on what the next step is going to be. Right. Because the experts they know what it's going to take for good problem solving, whereas the novices, they just have really no idea. They're just kind of grasping at straws, right? And so that's why he would do this thing where he'd interrupt them all the time to say, "Hey, why are you doing that? What's going on?" And I do that sometimes in my classes too. It's like, "Okay, so tell me what you're doing right now." And I don't do it enough that people really start to fear me. But Schoenfeld was always good that way. The other thing that he did that just aggravated the students to no end is you'd solve the problem, you'd get the answer, and then he'd say, solve it again a different way. And that would just drive people crazy because they're like, I know the answer. But it actually is really useful because you learn a lot about math by seeing that there's multiple ways to solve the problem and why is that way different than this way, and how come it gives you the same idea. You learn a lot through multiple solutions to the problem. But no teachers ever, I should say no, but rarely.
A couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
we were just talking about that. So actually, there's one. There's even non-math ones. It's would you rather math? Kind of cool.
Would you rather?
Would you rather math?
Would you rather math?
And so they give you these things. Would you rather this or this? And they want you to explain why you have, and then back it up with your reasons.
Like what would be an example of something?
Like there's one, it's like, if you go to the site, if you want to put their tags, would you rather maps.com?
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can get this.
Would you rather map?
Is it this one?
Have non-map links. So the URLs, would you rather maps.com? Use that one in there.
Is it this WordPress one?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And so they give you all these different
They give you
ones.
options. All right, but what's an example? Would you rather install and maintain an electric hand dryer or a paper towel dispenser? Oh, so kind of open-ended, interesting problems. That's cool. Yeah, those are always good. And then things that there's not an obvious way to solve it, right? So often, especially in physics, we tell students, here's how you solve this type of problem. Okay, here's this type of problem. Do what I just told you, right? And that doesn't. It just requires like listening and repeating what was done. Whereas if you give someone these sort of weird problems, there's no obvious solution path, and so they've got to come up with one on their own. That's like the how many piano tuners are there in Boston kind of thing, right? That's a crazy question, but you can actually answer it, right? If you do some estimations and be creative about thinking of things. So that's an interesting one. All right, so that's the idea with the Schoenfeld and his problem solving. Well, anything else we want to add about that other than the examples?
The math part.
I think we're good on this on the examples. What did they conclude at the end of this paper in terms of doing this in class? Is this something that everybody can do?
No. They said that you should kind of like cherry pick. Like they pick the parts that are good for you and whatever it is that you're trying.
They said it's not a packaged formula. Like there's certain things that work for certain people and for certain kids. Use your professional judgment.
Exactly. Right. But they give a few strategies, right? Talking about the domain knowledge, the heuristics, the controls. All right. Cool. The list of methods is pretty good. They talk about coaching, scaffolding, and articulation. So they do a nice job of kind of articulating what these things are. And then they have their lists. That's right. This stuff is pretty good. Gives you a good sort of sense of where it goes. And there's a couple of interesting things on this list. We talked about things like breaking down the subject matter, figuring out what are some of the strategies people use, and how to control. Cool, right? And so then these are the six things they do: modeling, coaching, scaffolding, articulation, reflection. Reflection's a really big one, and that's another one that we don't tend to do enough of, right? Especially like if you show a movie, right? You got to have that reflection part. If the movie ends and the bell rings, everybody goes out. It's like, oh man. I always get on the student teachers if they don't end the class well. You've gotta come to some conclusion. You gotta have people think before they run out the door. And so the reflection part is big. And this is one that comes directly out of which part of the apprenticeship was this? The global before local skills.
That was when you were just observing, right? Or no?
Well, but this comes out of Lavenvanger, right? Which part of that is?
Was this when you were observing as part of the community, but you weren't actually doing, or no?
Maybe. I'm thinking in terms of the tailors, right? What do the tailors start at? They do the final project, right? And then they learn the details. They see the big picture, and then they work on the details eventually. And so that's one of the strategies that they advocate. Now, again, that's one of these things. It doesn't work for every subject, right? But for some subjects, that's going to work. Start increasing diversity, right? Don't start with too many things at once. Start with a narrow range, and then sort of become more diverse as you get as you get pretty competent in the one that you started with, right? Community practice. What does this part mean? Intrinsic motivation.
So normally in apprenticeships, like regular apprenticeships,
Mhm.
there's some sort of intrinsic motivation because the apprentice is there to
Mhm.
learn a skill, so maybe to make money or to learn how to, make something really cool or whatever.
Mhm.
And so they talked about how it's more difficult in a modern school format to, create that intrinsic motivation. It's something that if you use an apprenticeship model,
Mhm.
it might be a little bit easier to do because they can see how
Mhm.
their learning is actually going towards an end product.
Right. Yeah, so you have that intrinsic motivation in the apprenticeship, and you got to find ways to sort of build that into your class and to give students reasons why they want to do this task. Why do they want to participate in these activities? And that's going to come up in the social justice stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute. Cool. All right. And this is a nice paper that's really long though. All right. So it goes into situated learning and all this stuff here. All right. Let me see. What of this was not? What's in the other paper that wasn't covered in here? Did we have anyone who was going to summarize this one? This is the situated cognition. By the way, I don't know if you're probably not familiar with the ED researcher, right? So this is the it's a journal, but it's kind of like more of a magazine format. Pretty much everybody who's in research gets it. So it's a pretty big deal to get an article in Ed Researcher. And they tend to get written, as you can see, it looks more like a magazine than your typical journal article. Right? So they do a nice job where they talk about some of the history and some of the backgrounds of cognitive apprenticeship. But we've talked about that a whole bunch already. Cool. And they use the same examples. They talk about Schoenfeld, and they talk about the reciprocal teaching. They also talk about some of the Lave's stuff with the. This is where they have the example about the cottage cheese. Did anybody read that? So this is the one where they were following people who were in Weight Watchers and to figure out how they were solving this problem of taking 3/4 or 2/3. Right. Yeah. So that was an example of how people are sort of developing their own problem-solving techniques and are able to do it, but couldn't probably explain it all that well, right? They could explain that it works, but can't do it mathematically very much. All right. Anything else that struck people as this? They make this distinction between the sort of academic or cognitive stuff and the idea of the JPF. You remember what that is?
Just plain folks.
Just plain
like
folks.
Everyday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of a nice thing. There's been a number of papers about how do regular people reason and how do experts reason. Sort of expert novice thing, but just plain folks aren't exactly the same as like kids, right? Because they're usually pretty skilled at getting through life and dealing with stuff, and so this is the typical way that just plain folks like to deal with stuff. Cool. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we need to talk about here before we get to move on. Cool. I like this picture. So it takes them about halfway through the paper to actually get into talking about cognitive apprenticeship, and then they use those same examples. What was the magic square problem? This is the putting all the numbers in so that the sum of the digits on each row and each column and each diagonal is the same. And so you have to try and do it. Oh yeah, the part about Lampert. That's the part that's different. Cool. So Maggie Lampert was it's another math ed person, and her research was really all about how important it is for kids to be talking in class, and not so much what the teacher's talking, but about the students talking and have scaffolding about how to explain things and how to talk about things in the classroom. And so in her class, they do a lot of students explaining, and they have a particular sort of scaffold for how the students do explaining. And let's see. Right, so this is an example of one of Lampert stuff where they're talking about give me a mathematical story, right? So we've got to be able to explain stuff in math about talking about it. So we'll come up with a story that goes with this graphic, or even with just a problem, right? So the student has to come up with a story, and the teacher gets to ask about how that works. And then, of course, the students can start telling their own stories and having other students ask about it, and that becomes part of the norms and the practices of the classroom. All right, moving quickly here, trying to see what other important things. This is the same idea about doing the general, starting with the big picture ideas and then going towards some more detailed. Cool. And you kind of expect. So the Lave article and the cognitive apprenticeship literature really goes together in a lot of the literature, because you need to sort of have this idea. Okay, yeah, it's fine and all to talk about apprenticeship and communities and practices, but we really need to focus this on more on the kind of stuff that happens in schools, the things that we need our kids to learn. And so these give some examples how to do that. There's not a good science example here, though. What of this stuff do you see is in science? Do we do problem solving?
Yeah.
Some of the classes, right? How many people do problem solving in your class? Okay, about half, I think, a little more than half. Cool. And I'm sure you all have different ways of teaching problem solving to students and helping them with it. Cool. Did some of these ideas seem familiar with things you already do? Typically they would. I mean, this stuff has been around in education for a while, and certainly all the people that you ever took a methods course or anything with it have learned about it at some point.
I think
Yeah.
one of the things in chemistry, I think kids tend to learn algorithms that we don't have understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that is really interesting. So even though I model for them, they will learn the step by step by step, but they have no understanding of what those steps mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it a challenge. I think that my project that I'm doing now
Mm-hmm.
is very good in the sense it makes them start thinking a different way, as opposed to being algorithmically, but at the same time, they're not used to
Okay.
thinking that way.
And what's the new way?
The
Oh, the POGO. Yeah. Do people know POGO? Is that generally, you probably reported on that in other classes, talked about it? No? Yes?
Well,
So,
Maybe?
we were both really interested in it last year.
right, we went to
Right,
an
you
NSTA and we bumped into each other. I was
Oh, very cool.
at the POGO seminar, and like I just like I don't know if say the data is not coming out the way I want to. I kind of listen to me too, but I feel like it's making the kids think, and that's very difficult.
Mhm.
And
I think it's also because they're not necessarily used to it. We
no,
haven't
that's what I'm
been
saying.
implementing
They're
the
not used to
standards
this.
for
They're not used to. I can show it to them and they can do it. But the problem is it's so short term, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pretty much with any of these techniques where it's requiring the students to do more than they used to, and requiring the students to be explaining things and be responsible for all kinds of stuff instead of just handing in a paper to the teacher, they get kind of unhappy about it at first. And sometimes that lasts, right? Sometimes they're always unhappy the whole way through. I don't know, what are you finding?
Well, it's what I hear my students say about other teachers who are also using POGO and making kids do reading for homework and
Oh my
expecting them to do it.
Or
They're like, oh, Mrs. What's-Her-Face doesn't teach. I'm like, yeah, she's actually doing exactly what she's doing. But I found that my students really fought it in the beginning. But after a while, they're like, oh yeah, I like report Ks. Like, these are fun.
No, they're a lot better at it, but I just, the results is not what I'm wanting to get. I want to see.
They're not as magical as I was hoping.
Yeah, I want magic.
I do too.
But actually, I started doing with the polls is I have them go through it and they do the whole thing on their own. And then at the end of the class, once I do it, they've all at least attempted every single question. I have a notes, like a summary notes page on the back of it. And then I go through the main ideas like this and I summarize it for them so that they can see my thought process after they've struggled with it. So
I stole that idea and I put it in some of the middle of some of the focal things that I've made. And we do it after each major concept. So after the kids have worked through the information a little while, I'm like, all right, so what did we actually see here? And I found that my kids are actually fighting me because they want to use prior knowledge from another place that was actually incorrect. They used their 8th grade model of the atom. They're like, no, this is wrong. And I'm like, no, you have to use the data and explain what's happening here using what's in the model. And they really hate it. They really do. When I introduced subshells last week to my AP kids, they were like, there's more than just the rings. And I was like, the rings aren't even a thing, guys. It's just it really did that. But it was fun. It was a misconception that we were battling with. Not a misconception, but just a younger, simpler view of what it was. It was they were just showing you that because you weren't ready for this. So,
Cool. Yeah, what do we call those things instead of calling them misconceptions? What's some other good names for that?
Wrong.
They're wrong.
I don't like that one.
half-truths.
Half-truths. Yeah, the term that gets used in literature a lot is intuitive conceptions or naive conceptions. If it's really about stuff that kids come with from the playground, that kind of stuff.
It's not bad. It's just that we have improved on it over time. So
Well,
they
you
only
can
learn
just
half
say-
history.
You just say, well, it's right for hydrogen only.
Yeah.
It's right for hydrogen only, so if you're talking about hydrogen, yep, that's exactly right. But now
That's
it's talking
perfect for that one.
One.
Yeah, another way you can tell that it's like an intermediate model, right? This is a model that we learn in order to get you the basic idea, but now we gotta learn the real model, right? We've gotta take the training wheels off, see what's really going on.
Well, even then, it's we're not even showing them the entire thing because we don't talk about quantum.
You know what I really find interesting in these readings is the terminologies that they use that I have no idea what they're talking about. For example, no, seriously, when I was reading this one about the aside symbolic violence,
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah.
like, what in the world? I've never heard of symbolic violence. That must be a term among the experts that I can't look up symbolic. Maybe I can just Google it. But yeah, that's what I really come across these these conceptual terms that I don't know. I kind of feel like.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm with you on
I
that.
need to know what that means.
I don't know if I can help you with that.
I feel that way when I was doing my research for the last year. Every time I see the word heuristic, I hate it. So I'm like, you just made this word up. You just say what it really is. And I know that a lot of people use it. It's
Yeah.
All right, who uses the word heuristic?
Our
the
readings
people
did.
is what I base my experiment on. I looked it up a million times. I have to look it up every time I It's one of those things that I just I don't like this word.
So you have a heuristic for dealing with that word?
I do. I have a heuristic for dealing with this word. It's a process that I write it down every time. It's a rule of thumb, a procedure that works to provide a satisfactory, if not optimal, solution to a problem. There you go. That's what I work.
It's a thing. It's a thing you do.
It's a thing you do. And so it's so much better than saying it's a thing you do. It's a process. Instead, we use this word heuristic.
Sounds so cool when you say it that way.
You don't have to actually evaluate the details of it, just kind of your de facto problem solving.
Right. So for my project, it's the science writing. It's really just a process for doing lab reports.
So why don't you stop that cool one? I was trying to say, science reading process.
Well, one of the things you will find with every community is that they develop their own language, right? What are some of the things that teachers say? What are some teacher language that you would use that regular people wouldn't know?
SSDs, IEPs, all those kind of things.
All over lingo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's an acronym though. I think an IEP makes sense because, it makes sense because it's like, okay, it's an individualized education plan, but
Right.
like
Well,
on
even if you
holistic,
said
it's
that,
like,
people would know, I don't think necessarily, individualized education plan, they'd be like, okay, but I don't think anybody would assume or try to.
Well, they wouldn't
What
know
that
exactly,
is.
yeah, they wouldn't know.
What's stalling?
Yeah.
Something I really hate.
There's that. People don't know what that means, right? Yeah.
Now it's my system.
Yeah, so
So-
it's
so-
like the food town method of additional employees. And then a lot of students come up to me like, Mr. Here, do you know about the food town method of solving employee problems? And I'm like, no. He just makes up words and then calls it so we can refer to it as like a method of problem solving. And then the students will like come to tutoring and ask me
You'll
for
be a
help.
cult leader someday. Well, so part of when you know you're part of a group is when you learn its language, right? If you know what spelling is, that means you're in the club, right? You're part of that community. Other people aren't going to know that. That's true of these academic words, and sometimes people get a little out of control with the words. Like I totally am with you on that. But the more you get into that community, the more you would start to use those and become very familiar with that.
I feel like chemists do this frequently. They
Yeah.
do their own flipping language for so many
Mm-hmm.
things. And as I teach my kids more and more, it's like, oh, we actually understand when you talk now.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not even, I'm joking a little bit, but they feel like they know so many words that normal people don't know. And I was like, this is like taking Spanish, except it's chemistry.
That's what they say about science, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like general language.
Totally. Yeah. And that's going to be true of any subject. Once you get far enough into it, there's going to be like these weird things. There is. Yeah. Okay. So I wanna switch gears a little bit because we've been talking for a while, and I know that not everybody is up current with the reading, but you need to know the stories. So we had these two papers. One is this chapter 2 of Teaching Science for Social Justice. Oh, where's my copy? I left it in my room. And the other one is Barton, Tan, and Rivette. The Teaching Science for Social Justice, Chapter 2, which was the one I want people to focus on, has a story about this kid named Kobe, right? So that's kind of the story. So I want you to either read that story, or I want you to read the story in the other paper about Amelia, right? Amelia is a Latina who doesn't like school very much, but has an experience in class. Should I say any more about that?
Is she the troublemaker? No.
Yeah, they're all both troublemakers. Kobe and Amelia, they're those kids. Kika, you want to?
Also, it mentions to reply to 2 other posts.
So yeah, that's the assignment, and you still have to do that assignment. But for right now, I want you to either review one of those stories, or if it's the first time, you need to read one of those stories. And it's only the first couple of pages of the chapter, so you don't not having to read the whole chapter right now. All right. And then once you've read it, we have a Google Doc to work on called the Social Justice Stories document, and I want you to fill in some information on this. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit and let people do some reading and thinking, and then a little bit of writing.
It's on November 4th.
Oh yeah, the links to the papers are both from 2 weeks ago. So the November 4th class, it's either this link for the book, and that's more of a secondary kind of a thing. The paper here is more about an elementary classroom, but either one is fine. You can pick. And remember, we're looking at chapter 2. If you're looking online, it's a Google book, right? And so the chapter 2 starts on page 19. And there are a few pages missing on this, but I think all of chapter 2 is there.
Yeah, it's like,
Cool. All right. So, but don't start writing just yet. First go and read one of those so that you have the context for what we're talking about. All right. And so.
How many of you guys wear glasses or contacts? Have your prescriptions changed in the last year? Because mine have gotten so much worse.
Like this.
You're a reader.
Oh, I love reading. I just like my eyes get bigger. It's on the
Is this one right?
Yeah, that's one I'm.
So it's not the two we just
We just answered.
from. So the ones we just looked at were the ones from.
As this.
We just got on doing those.
Just be reading.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've done it before.
Yeah, that's good. This one works.
Okay, that one I want
Hey, we heard of this.
That's why they open manually.
He did it wrong. It's not working.
Okay, ready,
My best.
I think chapter 2 is on there.
Was it?
Yes.
Things that can be interpreted to mean or diminish somebody, that somebody with authority. So that's August of all. Strong. Microaggressions.
Did you see that just, I don't even know you're gonna, like, answer.
Oh, it's supposed to write something in there.
Yeah, but.
Me too. I just-
So the book itself is coming around, so you can get to see the sense of the whole book and the missing pages from Google. Oh, Carrie's on. Hi, Carrie. Yeah, Carrie's not feeling well today,
She's always so good about doing the online stuff. She's a true.
especially when I remember to turn it on. It's always helpful. Dennis also has something going on. Something with his wife. She's ill. It's on today's page called Social Justice Stories.
You say what you think happened for the COVID one? It says what do you think happened the next day in line for a year? Is that after he started the garden project or he went back to school and then decided not to?
Yeah, like they go when I went to school, so like where the story ends.
Not much.
That's a total guess, speculation. Right.
Do you want to read both?
Just do one. Said BS, an editorial comment?
Yeah, that's, I didn't know if you wanted us to like,
That's all right.
initials.
Oh, no, it wasn't an editorial comment.
It's my whole life,
I thought you were commenting on our teaching technique.
I can remove my initials if you like.
Oh, okay, mindful not to name it.
There you go.
We debated when we were naming Jordan because he's from the name's Ryan. We're like, in today's day and age, people remember Dallas enough to think of JR. And we decided that no, it was too long.
I
But in Dallas, now we usually do that, yeah.
had some friends
Oh,
in
yeah.
high school who attended JR, because they were juniors actually, and I didn't like the name that their dad had. So they are like, oh, JR. They don't want to be juniors either. JR is
There's really no way to tell.
Once you put your initials in,
So, but wait, do you know what anonymous creature you are?
if someone scrolls over it, like if you place it at a certain point and someone scrolls over you, you say like, I'm.
Yeah, if you look up here, you might be able to tell.
When I was looking at it, I saw some other people's names.
Because it's not requiring you to log in, tends to put everybody anonymous even if you are logged in. Carrie's the only one who's not anonymous. The last question, by the way, is just speculation. I see you're all being very optimistic. I like it. All right, we just need a little more on the first questions on each one.
It's a long article.
But yeah, but the story part is not that
Oh,
long,
we
right?
just have to read the story part?
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
That's the
not
primary thing. So what was Kobe's relationship with school, though? We haven't said much about school here.
Well, I just read something sad about his relationship with school.
What do you think most kids would react if a worm pooped on their notebook?
Well, most kids would like.
How would most kids react to that? Worm poop.
They think it was disgusting.
Okay. Maybe there's two kinds of kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Kindergartners love it.
Yeah.
If we could be like armchair psychologists, why do you think Amelia would like the poop? And if you haven't read these stories, you may be inspired to go and read them because they're very fun.
Something unique that she had and nobody else had.
You think she would like things that are unusual? You think that would be part of her personality? Non-traditional?
She's like the girl who plays baseball.
I'm guessing, yeah.
Anonymous gopher.
Uh-oh, you're getting edited?
Yeah, it's a bit.
Uh-oh.
I'm not typing here, I'm typing.
Cool.
I have a student named Kobe, so I yell at until I think about it.
Is there similarities?
No. But I mean, his name is, I'm not even, Kobe Love. That's his name. It's a
Nice.
cool name. But I don't know, it's like, so I'm picturing him.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Better family.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start with elementary school. Are people done writing mostly? Okay. How about another minute to finish up whatever you're thinking? Nobody took up my challenge to do some armchair psychology on Amelia here.
I'm not much of an armchair psychologist.
Maybe it was something that she had nobody else had.
I mean, maybe it's because I read this book called Jocks and Burnouts. I think I've talked about that in the past. Didn't I talk about that before? This idea that there's these two groups of kids in school: the kids who like school stuff and invest themselves in school, and the kids who think school is useless and invest themselves on what happens afterwards. Maybe some of them are on the football team. And I mean, but it's not jocks in the sense of sports jocks. It's jocks in the sense of school, buying into school, part of the school thing, sort of pro-school in some sense. And that may be athletics, it may be academics, it may be different things. And then the people who are anti, right? And I have this vision of Amelia, I don't know if this is right or not, that she's sort of in this anti-crowd. She's going to be contrary to whatever the teacher said, any authority, she's going to go against that. And so something that would maybe normally you would think of as this is disgusting, she's going to say, oh, it's cool. I don't know. What do you think? Am I just really off on a limb here? That I don't know.
Yeah, I think based on that thought process, it's kind of interesting because there's certain kids in your class, those antisocial weird ones that you just know is just like either going to become a genius one day or like blow something up. Like they're that weird kid that when they come back to kill everybody, you just be like, oh hey, I was nice to you. Like, but the thing is like if you kind of humor like their weirdness, like when everyone else in class is just like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. And then like you go up to that kid, and you're like, yeah, honestly, like I thought like that Lord of the Rings episode was like the coolest thing too. Like none of the other ones can possibly compare to that. And all of a sudden it's like So then if you're in science, then you're saying that she would go into science or connect to whoever fueled their fires.
Yeah, I mean, one of our challenges, we got to try to connect to all these kids, and they're all so different, right? The same thing isn't going to interest the Lord of the Rings kid and the I don't know what would be the opposite of that.
Football.
Yeah, the football fan.
You
Or
could be a Lord of the Rings fan.
I totally could. We're just really making gross stereotypes here. Yeah, but at some point you've got to try and reach all these kids, and they're in different places. And so if you can find something that is like, oh yeah, the kids in the back row are gonna like this. Do the bad kids still sit in the back row? Does that happen anymore?
Yeah.
No, that's the way it used to be when I was in school. Yeah, they all end up there eventually, right? Yeah, so you need something to appeal to the front row kids and something to appeal to the back row kids, and so you've got to sort of find these things out there. And so this is a thing was totally unplanned by the teacher, right? So what happens? So somebody just quickly tell us the story here. What happens with Amelia?
So the worm, they were touching the worm and stuff, right? And the worm pooped on her notebook, and she like screams out that the worm pooped on her notebook several times. And she goes to tell the teacher, and the teacher is like, "Yes, the worm pooped in your notebook." Very matter of factly, why don't you sign it and circle it and write worm poop next to it? And then he said, and then go around and show everybody the worm poop. And she did, but while she was showing everybody, she was like socializing because she was still off task.
Yeah. All right. And so that becomes this event, and they're going to use this event to talk about sort of the things that happen in class and how kids are suffering from, what was it? What were we calling it? Symbolic violence or not? I still don't know what that is. But yeah, but this is a story of a kid who gets sort of a light under her for at least one period, right? Right. And so what are some of the things that made that possible? And can we highlight certain things on our write up here? What are the key things that we should highlight here? Where's my highlighter?
I'm just thinking.
It's not there.
It happened to her and no one else.
Mm-hmm. That it made her. Oh, here's what I want.
Probably put the spotlight on because she's always doing that.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Undo that. So she got to be unique. She had something that was sort of special about her. And what did the teacher do? Did he say that's awful?
Yeah, he didn't kill it. He just said, all right, well, sort of it.
Right.
And he even made points about it, like that's not what we came up with. I forget exactly what he said.
So he took her sort of special event and made that an important thing in the class. All right. Well, there was a lot of comments on this section. What were some of the others? Yeah.
I like where it said embrace for learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's just spotlighted, just to get that kid, if she's excited about something that's new like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So allowed her to be excited in class, and even though she's breaking the rules, right?
And to show her that he was excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did he say that she was queen for the day?
No.
No, nothing like that. But said, "Oh yeah, isn't this a cool thing?" So it was about the science. All right.
Well, in this article, it seems like every individual the story that they told us, every individual got to use their personality, the way their personality as a catalyst, or the activity and their personality was melded in such a way that they were able to shine in class. Like the shyest person in class, the loudmouth in the class, they use their innate personalities to somehow display their individuality in class.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a social exercise with the science aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Social exercise with the science as a giveaway for that.
Yeah. So you sort of combine science and sort of expressing your individuality somehow, right? How does that change Amelia's perspective on science?
She can participate.
Mm-hmm. That she can participate. That it's okay for her. Like nothing bad happened because she participated, right?
And at least that day it was fun.
She had some fun, right? Got to be the center of attention. Yeah.
This is going to show basically it's not so much about Amelia, but more about like the teacher, because kids' minds being so malleable. It's not like they're like it's not like you ask a sophomore, what do you want your major to be? They're going to say like journalism or psychology as opposed to physiology or chemistry. But a lot of the maybe the reason why we're here is because we had a science teacher that like made it interesting or whatever. So she might be more inclined to science just because of the teacher. And I find that really common because, like Toba's saying, when you get kids hanging out in your room at lunch, they're more likely to be what you're doing because they have that connection with you.
Mhm.
So
Right.
those kids probably like, forget the Punnett Square, those kids will probably like science because Total likes science. And then that kid's more likely to grow up and be a science teacher in the science field.
So they're influenced by the people that they're around. There's the social, the teacher, the peers.
I really liked your story because you can see, you're not gonna give it away, but she progresses, like,
That's okay.
going to weekend science classes, and that was her own initiative. I don't know why, I don't know if the pooping thing was the hook on,
Yeah.
but she seemed like she really liked science from the get-go. And that seemed to calm her personality down, that she was, after the end of 2 years, she was still on a troublemaker, she was a CM student, she really liked it. She, of all the people they were talking about, she seemed to have a genuine interest in science. And her exuberance was always kind of got in the way, but.
Yeah, I think in some ways it kind of allows her to say that she liked science. Like she had to have something that made it okay for her to like it, right? Because you can't just like something because the teacher says you're supposed to, right? There has to be you have to have some reason for it. Right?
Sometimes I think that a teacher's enthusiasm can be infectious.
Yeah, definitely.
Question about this paper, because it was talking about like symbolic violence or something, and I was like,
I just talked about
like so that's supposed to be like the general populace has this like intrinsic view that like men are scientists and women are not, or something like that. Is that still a thing? Because I feel like I didn't grow up like that.
You should tell the 2/3 of male students in making chemistry class that.
Really?
Yeah, it's really boy dominated this year.
There's yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, I mean, like there isn't such a huge gender disparity with like the number of male and female students that pass the AP, but if you look at the ones that like actually get an engineering degree, and like on Monday I'm taking my students to UCLA partially for that whole purpose. Our whole program there is like how we get females and underrepresented minorities who are same qualified to actually even just apply. They're just not even considering it arguably. And so they're just saying, well, you have all these students who pass the AP physics test, but why don't they apply as engineering majors?
It's just interesting, Jennifer and our cohort that we teach in the medical magnet, actually a majority of the class is female. So it's really interesting because, I'll teach, honors physiology periods 1 and 2, which seems to be like 50-50, but then the medical, specifically the medical magnet, like that freshman group becomes a sophomore group, and it's interesting because this year, do we have like maybe 7 kids that are like 42? Yeah. So it's really predominantly, female based that's, really expressing interest in science. And I think even Diana, and I think there's a couple of them taking APs, and both of them are girls. So
Cool. I got a couple more. Yeah.
I did research on this because I originally wanted to be my
Action research.
action research. And one of the things that some of the data that I was looking at was that it's actually pretty evenly balanced through college. But then when it actually comes down to like getting a job in the field is where it drops off. And some of the things I was reading was talking about like discrimination at the college level, where some of the women were like discouraged or like not helped the way that some of the male students were helped, or even comments were made to them that made them feel like they didn't belong there and that they benefited.
Definitely, the higher you go, you still see the gender disparities.
Well, and to go back to what you were saying too on the medical aspect, okay, so that's science, but I think if we're talking about stereotypes and why there would be more women is because if they're going to be doctors or nurses, they're in a caring, like nurturing role, and so it's different. I mean, so stereotypically, if you're talking about females being in that caring, nurturing, protective-ish role, then that is something that might be influencing that too.
No, I just wanted to say that I think just the very nature of, like, men usually with each other are very competitive. It's a different dynamic between men. What?
I said Brent's not.
Oh, Brett's not, yeah. He's an exception. And then women tend to be more cooperative. I really am making, but there seems to be like, yeah, that I think in itself makes a huge,
And that is explaining, let's come back to the original question was, is this still an issue?
yeah, so
Or is it
I
over?
do think the dynamics between men and women are different. Women want to help each other out, you know, if you talk, oh, I'll help you. Men is like, loser, or something, you know, they'll put you down, right?
We're all Donald Trump
it's
inside.
It's a culture.
Want to help everybody, and then Delta Brothers would be like, 42% average, you guys suck, like, do better. And then, like, you would either like go home and cry, or you'd go home and study your butt off to do better.
Well, and also, you know, if
You know.
a woman is aggressive, if a woman's aggressive professionally, that's seen
Like,
as she's a B, right? While a guy who's aggressive is like, he's, you know, he's
Go get her.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
so there's your symbolic violence, right? You're a B because you know, you're actually aggressive, you wanna get somewhere, but if you're a man, it's totally great, you know? But for women, if you're that way, you're a threat, you're.
And I think that probably is what they mean by symbolic violence. I think that's as close as I understand it. Let me just say one point I want to get you in. They do these, I don't know, you've probably heard about these, where you get kids and you say, oh, draw a picture of a scientist, right? And what do you always get? A guy in a lab coat, right? And I mean, that's just still the thing, and that doesn't change. But that doesn't mean we don't have lots of examples, and girls are doing better than boys in high school, and for a lot of respects in college, even in many science majors. So I'm not saying it's not there, but it's different than it was. It was our first couple of science cohorts had more men than women, and since then it's been the opposite, including one that was all women. That was an interesting cohort. Yeah, we had one guy in there and he dropped out. Couldn't handle it. All right, let's let the guy speak.
I actually don't know what symbolic violence is.
Okay, tell us.
So according to this, it's the violence which is exercised upon a social agent, or in other words, a person with his or her complicity. So in other words, they provide examples of boys and girls would be talking, and girls would be agreeing that yes, boys are smarter than girls. So it'd be something like that, which is really weird, because I would think kind of the exact opposite. It would just be stereotyping, but they have another one, class relations, in which both working class and middle class people agree that the middle classes are more intelligent, more capable of running a country, and more deserving of higher pay. So in other words, they're kind of agreeing with them being more useless in a sense, because it's a self-defeating.
Okay.
It's like war on
Still not getting the
Christmas,
violent side of it, but
It's interesting too, like culturally, I still don't think even as a society we're there yet. We took this kind of like this marriage like assessment like kind of thing through our church, you know, to see about like okay, like communication, all this other stuff. And it was interesting because a lot of the questions you had to take like 86 like really quick like little questions, and it was like fun, so we did it. But the whole thing is
86.
What?
86 fun questions.
Yeah, well, it was like well, kind of like it's like it was cool, but like we agreed to do this thing, and in the assessment, it actually talked about like through me, like my role viewing the wife working, and it was like there was about like 10 questions on like traditional values of where like the male will work and provide for the family, as opposed to like it literally said like, are you okay? And like we both like agreed on it because like she works and I work, and like, you know, like I'm here to work because, you know, I financially can't support her, but like traditionally, like, you know, in traditional roles, like that would be your problem if it was like, no, you're gonna be like a homemaker, you're gonna watch the kids. And it's really interesting because, you know, you take that graphic, crazy, like, you know, like you will not work because you're a woman, but then it's like you know, like in a culture of like, you know, basically like Christian households, like I want to be like respectful to where we have like an agreement on that, but a lot of it was based on like traditional values where as a man, you will provide, end of discussion. So I might, in some circles, not be that great as a man because, you know, we're talking about girls not being that great, but because she's working. So like, basically, I'm not getting the job.
Yeah, you loser.
So,
hey, that's symbolic violence.
You're not a real.
Come on.
yeah, I'm not really there. Honestly, like that can be looking at someone else like, oh, she works. Like, what are you doing wrong?
Yeah.
You know?
So because if we get the door, it's not chivalrous. It's like, well, I can get the door. It's like, well, what the hell, get the door then. But then the person behind the 8-year-old is like, why didn't you get the door for her? It's like, it's a lose-lose situation. If you're chivalrous, then she can open the door. But if you're not chivalrous, then you're a jerk. What do you do, Brian?
Well, what you shouldn't do is the running in front of somebody to open the door and like stepping on their toes so you can open the door. I know somebody who does that. It drives me crazy. But anyway, don't do that. But all right. So I have no idea how we got here. What? Oh, that's all right. It was good. But all right. Should we come back to where were we? Yeah, we're oh, so the symbolic violence thing, I think, like this stuff, I don't know if you've been reading the news about all these protests on college campuses. You're on a college campus. So Missouri, Yale, Occidental, Claremont, at least 2 of those universities managed to force the president to resign. Missouri and Claremont, both the presidents of the universities resigned. And one of the big issues right now is this idea of what was it? Microaggressions, right? So this is the term, and I think it's pretty similar to the symbolic violence, although that definition that Andrew had was a little different than I was thinking. But it's little things that you might not intend to be negative in some way, but could get taken because of the context, might get taken as insulting or demeaning or degrading in some way. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that we do all the time. I don't think we can get rid of it, but we're just supposed to be kind of aware of it.
There was like a student who had like feces like smeared into the wall of like.
That Missouri.
In Missouri.
Yes.
Like that, I don't call that micro, and they didn't
No.
do anything about it.
No. Yeah, no, that was a different issue. That wasn't the microaggressions. So what microaggressions?
I guess it was like a micro,
That was just not responding to incidents on campus.
That was why they were.
That was a
wanting them out.
It's a common, but the microaggressions thing is something people talk about a lot. The University of California proposed some new rules, and then everybody bashed them for it. And I don't really know where it's going to go, because I don't know that you can actually get rid of these things, because we're often doing it without being aware of it. But the more we're aware of it, the less we can teach ourselves not to do it. Sorry, Gloria.
I'm a little slurred, but if we don't want to go.
No, that's all right. We got time.
Because my brother, he's doing this, or he just finished doing his PhD in psychology.
Oh, yeah?
So he stumbled across microaggressions and he just focused on that. So he was teaching this, like, what is that called, the upward bound thing in the summer. And so one incident that happened, he was in Santa Barbara and he had like a whole group of minorities, and they were crossing the street, and this guy like just kind of goes straight through them, and he's like, I will stop the minorities. And like on the campus, so they discussed like
that's some serious aggression there.
And as they started to talk about like, these little things that happen in their everyday lives that they have to just kind of live with. One of the girls, she shared like she got this graduation card from her aunt, and they, then they kind of interpreted it, because her aunt said like, I'm so proud of you, especially for being a Latina, a strong female person who is successful, because that's a rarity. And so it's kind of like, I worked my butt off, and it wasn't like any more difficult than anything. However, you're singling out, like, you're making me feel like I overcame this even more monumental thing. So it's like that type of microaggression where it's like, yeah, it's good, but at the same time, it's like, okay, then you're kind of bashing it. So it wasn't like an outright thing, but it was like microaggression where you're just like,
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good example. The thing that the Claremont president said was something like, we want to help students who don't fit the traditional mold.
Yeah.
And that was seen as a microaggression, because, well, what do you mean I don't fit the traditional mold?
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. I have a feeling she was just tired of her job. That's why she resigned. But because that didn't seem like that big a deal.
But you know what? All our PDs and even that diversity lecture was all about, why aren't our minority students succeeding? Why aren't so it's like both sides of the equation. It's like, it's a fact that, you know, every year we go through this thing is that our African American and Latino population is not succeeding. You know, the achievement gap, right?
Yep.
And then now
Every year.
you're saying, even saying non-traditional is offensive when statistically speaking, it's kind of like, yeah, but it's kind of, you know, does that make sense? It's like you're burned either way. You're burned either way.
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly
So
the
don't say
intent
that
of that
out.
statement is not to be demeaning at all, but it just came out in a way that some people didn't like.
Well, that's interpretation.
Yeah.
That's their glasses.
I have a friend who is like 10 million times smarter than me, and she worked her butt off in school. And she's currently working on her PhD in chemical engineering.
That's great
at
for a
MIT.
woman.
She feels great. And like, she was mad because she is a perfectly qualified candidate. If you remove gender from like the application, and then like she gets crap from the guys in her program. She's like, "Oh, you're smart for a girl." It's like, "No, I'm smarter than you, you dumbass." And like, she gets really offended that her gender is brought up because she doesn't go around being like, "Hi, I'm a girl." You know, she just wants to be treated like a person, like everyone else.
Right.
And when she's like the only girl in her research group, and I was like,
I had a girl.
she runs the first grade.
I imagine. I'm sorry about that,
In my chemistry class that got really upset because this really cute Latino boy that came into class looked at her and called her just an Ivy. And boy, she was pissed. She was really mad.
He was probably just trying to give her.
No, I think he was too, and I think, you know, I told her, I said, it's a little disrespectful, but I said, I don't think he meant anything by it. That's what I told her. She said, I don't like guys to call me that. She said, it's very derogatory. And I tried to.
Yeah, cat calls and everything. You know, it wasn't that bad, but
I know.
yeah, if you take it a little farther, it gets pretty serious.
All I wanted to say is, I don't think we can ever get rid of it, because anything you say can be interpreted negatively. There's no way to communicate that can't be misunderstood. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
Sanitize your language.
Yeah, and if somebody's offended, then and you said you just take it back and say you're sorry, and that should be the end of it. But I don't know, it doesn't seem like that.
I feel like that we're really trying too hard to be politically correct.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, at our school, they do debates, and I took the negative for is Redskin offensive. And at the end of the day, one of our like understudies, like those students basically like put together the whole thing. I just figured had to argue it. But the thing is anything can be offensive. That was the argument. You know, like if you wanted to argue, is it racist? Is it inappropriate? Like whatever. Like the whole thing is like offensive. Like, you know, and one of the examples that we used was like, let's just say like, you know, your grandma passed away and she was wearing a pink sweater. Well, if you're wearing a pink sweater, I'm offended because you're insulting me because that reminds me of the death of my grandma. So now all of a sudden, since I'm offended by that, and then meanwhile the person's like, well, I was just wearing like a pink sweater, just because I wanted to. It was cold outside. That's all I had. So the interesting thing is, like, you know, I agree with Teresa when it's like, you know, like in terms of like offense and whatnot, like, you know, there has to be a point where you just basically say like, suck it up, you know, like because the argument he argues, he said, okay, well, the Washington Redskins, he's like, no one's freaking out, but then he's like, well, what about like the Los Angeles, like, and he was like, what about the Los Angeles like wetbacks? He's like, would that be socially acceptable? And then, you know, like the fact that we even call it like the N-word, but then like, you know, the kids on our basketball team, you know, it's like everything's like, it's all like positive connotation, you know, so it's like, well, it's, you know, like, where do we draw the line between like what's appropriate and not? And the thing is, it's all social perception, because, you know, you can say Redskin, but you can't, you know, it's like I'm white, so I have to say like the N-word as opposed to saying that, like even like in this class, it's like, it's interesting, you know, because it's all about perception, and that's the unfortunate. I don't feel comfortable saying it, you know what I mean? But, you know,
Are you allowed to give people permission like that?
But, you know, it's like it sucks because it's like, well, like I'm around it all the time.
That's great
like,
power you have.
These kids
I just wanted to take that off.
You can empower people. Cool.
I lived in the South for a few years, and
And it's different there?
And I was one of 3 Jews at my school, and I was the only practicing Jew, and they all knew I was Jewish, and I don't know. But I had a lot of people pray for me, and I found it impressive.
I imagine.
I have that in my school too. Oh, yeah, I have that in normal life.
I'm good.
I went to Catholic school.
Like, I'm good. That was with the best of intentions. They were gonna pray for me.
Oh,
yeah, they did.
I could think of better ones, but all right. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. So we talked about Amelia. What were the key things that the teacher did with Amelia in order to not offend her and let her sort of build this sort of enthusiasm about science? Was to sort of let her be and let her sort of take ownership of this science thing that she really had nothing to do with. But I mean, it was her notebook. But that turned out pretty well, right? That we don't know if it's a turning point, but if we take the researchers' word that was kind of a key event, and they don't really know, they're just kind of speculating. But it makes for a good story, right? What did we think was going to happen to Amelia after this? Yeah. Cool. So, but do you think do you think this is something that could carry on forward, that she could become interested in science? Is it for sure that that's going to happen?
No.
What? Oh, no. What are the sort of things that need to happen for her to be successful in science, or what are some things that could derail her?
So later on in the paper talks about creating this like hybrid space, right? So in this particular class, she was able to make this third space where she took her home personality and her science personality, and she was able to mix them together so that she looked cool in front of her peers, but was still able to express herself in the scientific domain.
Mm-hmm.
But if in future science classes she doesn't have that third space to work in, she may have to choose which one she wants to go forward with. And so she might choose her personal, her personality, her normal, home personality, whatever that is called, over, so that she looks cool in front of her peers rather than the science personality if she has to make things.
Right. So if she's forced to choose whether she's got to give up parts of her personality in order to continue in science, when would that happen? If she gets with a teacher that
isn't tolerant of this.
that doesn't go with any of that, and, runs everything by the book.
But he's pretty strict too, that's what they said.
Yeah.
He's strict.
Shuts off and stuff down.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we don't know what's going to happen. She may be able to continue, or maybe this is sort of a fragile thing and it's easily sort of broken. It doesn't take much, and then maybe things go on in her life that have nothing to do with science that cause issues, right? We know many students that's happened to, right?
Yeah, there's so many students of mine, they're bright enough. I know they can do it, but their priorities are totally not there. It's about boys, it's about place the girls stuff, it's the boys and how they look and all this stuff. And it just drives me nuts because they pick it up really quick, but they don't practice it, so they never show the potential. But I think there is a discouragement that if your approval is upon your parents kind of thing. So that's another symbolic violence, I really do think so.
You mean like who's good looking or not, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I think girls measure each other on their attractiveness. That's the whole society, right?
Right.
It's not about how smart you are, it's how good looking you are, right?
It's like if you don't wear makeup to work, it's like, oh, are you sick? They're laughing as they know.
Like if you normally wear makeup to work and then you show up without it, it's like, ooh, you don't look good.
Yeah, they're like, oh.
You gotta set the bar low, is what you're saying?
Or if you're younger and you don't wear makeup, you look too young. So it's like you have to dress it up so that you
Look
fit
like the
within
teacher?
an age range.
Guys,
That's not fair.
I'm still trying to look like a teacher.
Same here. Like, even these first student, like, these are oh.
Why are you yelling at me?
Yeah, every time I shave, once in a while. Before, I used to always get stopped by security and
Get tardies, yeah.
Yeah, they're told to go to class. I'm like this coach here. Like, oh, you're gonna probably
Yeah.
Does it happen?
They know. All right, I think we've covered a lot of this, and definitely the outside things and the forces and where you are in your social standing in your school, especially in 8th grade, is like so much more important than all this academic stuff. But anything else about Amelia before we move on to Kobe? Do we feel like we've captured all the key things? I think we did a good job on that. Nice, well done there. All right, how about on Kobe? So someone tell us briefly what the story of Kobe is, for those who haven't read it. Yeah.
So Kobe's an inner city teen, but he's he's got a lot more responsibility for us to talk him than sort of white middle class teen.
What do you mean responsibility?
Well, he's he has a mother. He's got a bunch of siblings, but the mom's got absentee. She sneaks out. She's got an addict. Suggested, and so he's struggling in school, and a lot of it's he's kind of dismissing a lot of it in terms of like, well, I'm really talented in sports, so that's probably what I'll end up doing. And he's letting a lot of credence to that, and it seems like when he pushed, like, well, if it doesn't work out with basketball, then it'll be football or baseball. As if that would be that much easier, at every point. And then if that doesn't work out, then I can just be a chef because as if that's also an easy entry point.
I think he is always looking for something to be good at.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he hits a point where someone doesn't respect him, or if he can't be great at it, he immediately quits. And it's like, backup plan, I'll be a chef.
Yeah.
And so he keeps trying. Well, I don't know if trying is correct, but he attempts different things, and then he doesn't respond well to me.
Right. So he wants something that he's good at, that he can have confidence and have an identity. That's pretty typical of kids, right? Kids all want something, right, that they can sort of point to. Yeah.
People want
Exactly.
something.
Right. So what's his relationship with school? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, do you want to finish that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. So he kind of medicates some of his failures with drugs, and and it uses that in his home life as kind of an excuse to maybe not excel in school. And not that it's easy taking care of his younger siblings at home. But that's the narrative that starts to play out until we join him.
What's he like in school? A little bit about.
Well, he's like 18 or 19, and he's a sophomore, and he dropped out, and at the end of it, he went back to work. Was he 18 or 19? I think that.
16 or 17.
16, 17 sophomore, and he dropped out-ish, like he's still enrolled, but at the end it says that he went back to class because he got interested in science, and he wanted to give it a shot when he went in. The teacher's like, who the heck are you? Because he never showed up and said there's no way he's gonna pass, so semester, which made him stop doing science because he didn't like middle school.
He's kind of trying to do
No, but that's what, as
Right.
a student, he's the kind of student he is where he's like, he doesn't really go and he's not interested.
Yeah, we know those kids.
Be interested in the law project though, which sparked his interest in science. He wanted to be a part of it because he wanted to be part of the interview. I think he wanted to be the devil's advocate part of the interview.
Yeah, so if you didn't read it, the story was that it's this kid who has all these troubles and issues and things, and then in his neighborhood, they do like this garden project where some of the community members, other kids, other people decide to build a garden to make the space nicer. And he's very pessimistic about it. Like, well, what are you gonna do? People are gonna throw trash in it. And they said, well, we'll put up a fence. And he said, well, we'll just throw it over. Like all these different things. He was very pessimistic about it, didn't think it was a good idea, didn't want to be involved. And then somehow or another, there was somebody who had a camera or something, and he asked to carry it. And she let him carry it. And then he proceeded to do interviews of the people that were doing this project. And and actually asked, some tough questions, and wasn't necessarily positive, but he at least asked more nicely than just saying it would be a failure, but he was like asking the questions. So he got interested, eventually helped with the project, thought he liked science, went back to school. There was only, he had been absent for so long that the teacher was like, who are you? You're not going to pass. And so he felt disrespected. He's like, I'm not going back.
I think that moment that you have up on the board was his defining moment of feeling respected and trusted. That made him change his mind about trying school again. Is Angie his teacher?
No, she's Bart,
researcher.
Angela Calabresi Bart. So she's the researcher, and she's running this after school program as part of a research project, right? Where she's studying these kids in this inner city neighborhood and getting them engaged in science. And so she's the one going to interview the.
I really like how she responded
Yeah.
to the situation, because he says, well, how do you
So
know I
that's
won't
her.
steal it or that I won't hurt you? And she's like, well, how do you know that I won't hurt you? And he's like, I don't. So it was like a mutual, like neither of them knew if they were safe for the other person, but all just going to trust each other.
No, I think he was the one who was going to hurt her.
Yeah.
Oh no!
But
Oh
then
yeah,
she
yeah, yeah.
responded
And then
and
she responded.
Yeah.
She trusts him. And people don't trust him. And so he's trusted that he moves forward.
Right.
And then she has the willingness to kind of continue to trust him, let him go just to see like where he's going to go. And now he can own something. He does something, and yeah, it leads to something else.
So that he's able to. I guess it's not in the. I was looking for it in here, but at some point in the chapter, I forget where exactly it is. She talks about his sort of persona at school, where he's the tough guy, right? He's the tough kid, and so he has this reputation. He has this this sort of identity that he has to maintain, and you can't do that and do your homework, right? Right. There's like this impossibility thing that he can't be seen turning in homework, or otherwise he's going to lose all his credibility, right, as the tough guy. And so he's kind of stuck. But this after school program provides, as we were saying, a third way, this hybrid space where he can do it and not have to give up his self.
I think I know it's crazy, and I realize this going from a fairly wealthy, affluent school to Van Nuys, and looking at the residential government that we have there. We call residential because they're not the magnet of the local area. That they actually fear success, because what we found is in trying after prodding in real life, not that there's research to back this, but just after dealing with multiple kids for like the last 3 years and being in their lives, most like legally can, it's like they fear success. If they say, well, I wasn't trying hard enough, it's like then they have an excuse. If they miss practice, it's like, well, I missed practice, that's why I don't start. Or why aren't you doing good in class? It's like, well, it's like they'll find a way, because they always want to have that excuse. So this way, if they did do their best and it wasn't good enough, since they don't know what being a real man, not this tough guy, but a real man is, then they'll always be able to fall back on the, oh, I coulda, I should, I wouldn't. And that validation, it's a self-validation of, in their own mind, detaching themselves from reality. And, as their coach, I try to bring them to reality and say, like, well, what if you did try it and then you actually became the starter? Then what? And it's like they don't even think about that because they're so used to not having success before that when they actually see that it's really close, they turn their own way. Kind of like in like life when a girl like that you like says hi to you, it's like, oh, you like turn around the other way because you're like, oh, I don't want to screw it up. It's like I know I'll screw it up because I'm so used to screwing it all up before. So it's interesting, to hear it's a pattern in your lives. Like, well, I could have dated her. It's like,
You got over it, Chris.
what's that?
You got over it, right, Chris?
No, these kids.
No, I'm talking about
Yeah, no, personally, I'm all right. I'm really good. I'm all right. But yeah, no, for the kids, it's like, it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Going from like Woodland Hills, El Camino High School to Van Nuys residential young men.
Right.
Two totally different kinds of kids. We're not talking just students staying hard, but just being in a position of success. It's amazing.
And avoiding that sort of real test and really trying your best, right? Because they don't want to know what the answer is, I guess, because they're afraid of it. I mean, we definitely know that there's this huge culture of you don't want to be trying too hard in school and to be the nerd and to be the teacher's pet, there's nothing worse than that, right? That's the worst insult you can give somebody. It's like, oh, you're the teacher's pet, right? You're not cool at all. Now, some kids are okay with that, right? They just sort of roll with it, and either because they sort of have a sense of themselves, or because they don't care what other people think, or whatnot. But there's this strong identity that you do that. So how do you break through it? I mean, you deal with this every day in your class. What are ways that we can allow people to still sort of feel cool and get their work done? Is it a good thing to praise kids who did a really excellent job and went over the top on their homework?
Yeah.
Of course. Not necessarily, because not all kids like that. I mean, like, in some cases, yes, but then other ones, let's say that the kid who is the tough guy actually does his homework, and then you make a big deal about it, and he's like, crap, now everybody knows, like,
I think we're doing that again, yeah.
Okay, and then they don't want that recognition. Like, I think there's different ways that you can praise the kids for it, whether it's just like, them walking out the door saying, hey, thank you for doing the homework, or you did a good job on your homework. So that he knows that that there is some, that you noticed, but not that it needs to be a big deal because you expect them to do well. Like, you didn't doubt that they have the capability to do that.
Right. No, don't be surprised about it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, this is something that we have to constantly figure out, right? How can we reach kids where they are? They're at this social development phase where they're trying to like get their standing in the pecking order and everything.
I think it has to do with microaggression as well. We never know what we say, how will be received.
Yeah.
We never know, right? And
Yeah.
things that are received and make an impact, we're like, well, nobody's like, what?
Yeah. So telling a kid they did a great job on their paper, you don't think of that as a
choice.
negative, but it could be.
Right. So I don't think there is no answer to that.
Yeah.
But
Respectfully, disagree. I think there is an answer. I think you have to reestablish the norms. Unfortunately, like we were talking about earlier, perception's reality. So you go to Claremont McKenna and you say we're trying to get basically a more affluent, or supposed to change the typical student, meaning that average white male dominated Claremont. I mean, we've been at Claremont, like our family out there, it is white as white can be. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, if you have the right idea, but then the whole thing is now all of a sudden it's not what you said, it's how you said it, and then and people can pick it apart. But if you reestablish the norm, without before perception sneaks in, because perception will always be reality. Like as teachers in LASD, we're guilty until proven innocent. So it's like that sucks. But you reestablish norms. You say, here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna do your best. We're gonna monitor your progress, and it's cool to be smart in this class. If you have a problem with being smart, if you have a problem with making money, if you have a problem with having goals and achieving those goals, well, then this class isn't for you. And then by reestablishing those norms, breaking down and saying it's not okay to not try to make excuses, then all of a sudden you're reestablishing the norm, because in their culture it's okay to make excuses. But in this classroom, in this team, in this setting, you say there's none. You're accountable for your actions, and it's no one else's fault.
Right.
With yours.
So you can kind of begin to build that culture within that community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. What were the reasons why the garden was good for Kobe? It wasn't school, right? That was one. What was the other things why was he interested in that? There were a bunch of comments on here about this already. Yeah.
I think one of the things is like he had a leadership role in it, and he was really respected. And so.
Cool. Oh, perfect timing. All right. So while they're setting up, let us. Any other things you're dying to say about Kobe? Have we got it all out? Okay. Cool. Let me just talk about the final project, and then we can have some food. The final project. So as most of you know, if you looked ahead, there was supposed to be this thing called a position paper, and there's a lot of good reasons to do a position paper. Not the least of which is it's great in your portfolio that you'll have to do next semester. But I wanted to also get back to what we did at the beginning of the semester with the NGSS and working on that and sort of making sense of that. And I think one of the things that people were saying is they wanted to really connect lessons to the new standards, see where the connections were. And that's also something that we need for the website, right? As we talked about before, we want to, what's the website again? Anybody remember it? bit.ly/csunngss. So if you don't remember that, that gets you to this site. We have this beautiful new logo. Very nice. The site is here. So what we're going to do for the final project, we're not going to post your final projects on this site. So you're going to turn it in to me first, and then I'll do the arranging onto the site and stuff like that. So don't worry about adding anything here. But for example, so all you need to do is pick one PE, right? So pick a PE that you know well. So what are the PEs again? Thank you. Performance expectations, right? They're down at the bottom of each of the grade level pages, or each of the subject pages, and they have these cool acronyms or labels with the dashes, LS 3-1, all that stuff. So you pick one of those, and then as you know, we want to sort of fill in these bottom parts, right? What's going to go there, and we want to make some real substance to these things. So some great examples, so that future cohorts, when they go to expand this, they'll have some great examples to build off of. So we want them to be great quality and not too long, right? Because people don't want to read like a real long thing about this. So we're going to keep them kind of short and do that. Are you going to have to make up all new lessons and reinvent the wheel? No. We can borrow things. We can link to lessons and things like that. Again, we're not going to put it on the website. You're going to turn it in to me first. The assignment here, so the details on the PE assignment is right here. And this is due at the end of the semester, which is somewhere around December 15th, 18th. Says, yeah, we're just going to do one. So you want to pick a performance explanation. You want to, describe what the PE is. Describe the science, right? So kind of a little mini lesson for maybe a teacher who didn't pay that much attention when they were in school with that particular subject matter. Let's say they're teaching out of their area. What is the science that they need to know, right? That's this part here. And then talk about lesson ideas. Now, we want to put the lesson ideas, we don't just want to have a list of, you could do this, or you could do this, you could do this. You want to sort of build it out. You don't need to have a lot of different lesson ideas. I think 1 or 2 is probably great. But you want to put some detail on it. It doesn't need to be the full lesson plan like we do on in other assignments. But really sort of describe that lesson that you have in mind, and make sure you highlight in there how it's connecting to the performance expectation. Performance explanation. No, performance expectation. That's all wrong. I gotta fix that. All right. Yes, exactly. A PEE. Okay, so I'll put a little rubric on here so you get a sense. I don't have any examples for you because we've never done this before. Right, so I did a rubric instead, so you can see the parts that you want to do. We've got the describing what the PE is, those parts, and then lesson ideas. Cool, and so you want to have high quality stuff, and then the formatting needs to be clear. If you're citing anything or if you're linking anything, make sure you give credit for all the work that you're using and who did it, that kind of thing. All right, questions on this?
Can we actually pick which one we want to do on the grade so that we don't have to duplicate?
With the hundreds of PEs that are there, I'm not too worried about that. I mean, it's possible we might have a duplicate, but I suspect it's unlikely. Yeah, and we can merge them anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. So you've got till December 15th to do this, but in 2 weeks, we have our last class. And I want to hear what you're going to do. So you're responsible for 2 weeks from now to give me a report, to give us all a report, to give us a report on your performance expectation and the lesson idea that you're going to elaborate in your paper. So you don't have to have it done, but you have to have your plan in 2 weeks. Does that make sense? Cool.
But have the plan at the same time as the other thing is due, first
yeah, that could be true. What day are we meeting? We meet on the 2nd. Right, so that's right around the same time those are due. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So that is the December 2nd class. Oh, shoot, I totally forgot this. I want to give you a reading because we got 2 weeks. This reading is not the greatest. I'll just say that right now. And I can say that because I wrote it. All right. So our reading for next week when you're off is this document called the Stats Primer, right? And what this is, bless you. It's a short description of statistical analysis for education that was written by me, and tries to cover things without being too terribly complicated. There are a lot of pictures. I know it's 12 pages, but there's a lot of pictures in here. See, like this, like that. And so we're going to look at that. When are we going to talk about stats? In the last optional class, exactly right. And so that class is on December the 9th, right? What's Hare doing? He's got class that night, right? So you're going to be there anyway. So you might as well come and practice some stats. Even if you don't have stats in your action research, you know, it's going to be interesting. So you're going to have to read the stats primer anyway, and that'll get you started. And then we'll do some practical stuff. We'll take a look at some data. We'll figure out what it says. We will explore and draw conclusions and remember what we're supposed to do with all that stuff. Did you ever have stats at all? Wait, didn't I come into your class? No, that was another cohort. Never mind. All right.
Stats of 91.
It hasn't changed much since then.
Yeah,
You know, except the tools are a lot better. The software is way better for doing it. All right, so that is the plan. We've got no class next week. Don't come here. Go have turkey somewhere.
I have a question.
Right.
Is the whole campus closed all next week, or is it just like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday?
Just Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Wednesday there's classes, but you know it's Wednesday night. Nobody wants to come.
I know.
They don't want to do that. All right, so we're not going to do that. So you're going to be home next week. You're going to be working on your what?
Paper.
Which paper? Communities of practice, right? That you think about. Take a look at the PEs. Find a PE you really like. Do some thinking about that, so that you have something to talk about on the 2nd. Cool, and then we'll have that, and then we'll come back and do the stats thing. So, but do take a look at that stats primer thing in your spare moments. You're not required. We're not going to get a test on it, so you can look it over, get the gist of it, and then you'll know that you want to come to that last class because it'll be super fun. I'm not sure if you believe me or not. That's all right. All right. Great.
I believe they'll make it as fun as
One more class. Can you believe that's all we have left? One more.
Too much work? Wow, fancy.
All right.
What's your real deal?
Oh, no, I wouldn't expect.
Well, it's good options.
It's under seated, just
What's in the till?
garlic bread.
I like the parents who like, my child is struggling what I do versus etc.
You don't see that many.
I just don't see like, why did my child get this? Why did my child get this? Well, but I should you get a 50%. It's
I like it when they bring up a paper, I usually don't review the notes, but
It was-
assignments. this last we did was with
The group analysis
That's
for
really
that.
key.
A lot of kids.
Yeah.
And so we did budget anxiety, like, to be able to regulate
Or was it lab questions? So we're looking for-
It was a year after.
No, my
sister
sister
graduated.
graduated.
So they're trying to lab.
Oh, really?
That's what I know.
Because I learned another one how to get
I didn't even know.
You know, the test that the kids is totally on, I actually had a round game, but I couldn't. And I went and there's
Oh, I have a.
but they were like.
Oh, really?
So how do you do it?
Yeah.
I,
And the trade response question, we had a
And we can't let it work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right, because teacher has an online game, they can't do that.
Yeah, so it's really, it's not. I'll show the class.
Is there a way to do it without really teaching them?
There's a different website, I'll show you guys.
I like their kids, I find that too, like, they'll fit
Like they
in,
love it.
Yeah, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
so,
it's kind of like it.
and then it also had, you know, like,
do it
a good 15
kids
minutes
got
ago.
to analyze
First of all, so I feel like it's well covered because.
And I have kids.
Or if it's not bounded, like, half of it, then the other person bounded, or the other half, so it's like, it increases the variance. Okay, and so then the other question is, because also.
Yeah, in terms of like what
Add it on board.
Help you with the
It's identical to me, but I think we're not gonna relationship.
My job is.
There was a, short
I mean, they have never,
Same order, same.
So, my focus is, my focus,
Also, I have.
What did you
so my
expect?
focus is like,
So they can fill it out.
My next one is like, are you gonna have like, so I did every single question
Individuals.
on the test is on the study guide. Again, there's some that aren't. Not received.
well,
So the idea
so, before we did this, in the past, my kids have been driving, like, where I had so many kids who were like, close to this, and this thing where I was like, this is like stupid.
Yeah.
And then I had so many kids who really loved it, like,
Who were looking at you like,
it's
It's like the people at the silent.
I went back there. So I had I just water with
Yeah.
hot bars and then
Oh,
this
seriously,
and
yeah.
then
Oh,
the
oh,
person
oh.
water, right? Next door to my mom.
Did I see garlic bread or did I not?
It's right here. You did not. Are the crystal powders?
It's the wood that has lime. Oh, I see, yeah. Like, oh my God, that's huge.
And so.
Oh, yeah,
I know.
Actually, a little addition to.
It's hard, but it's
it's good.
This, for a little bit.
Yeah, the bombs are really like. Yeah, that's been really, really helpful. Yeah. It's basically school administration support or lack thereof, because you want to have, right now. You do it. And then it's all in a group. So last 12 days, I was actually, I'll do this video.
It's a brand new charter school. Kids who are like 18. So anyway, so we have this whole thing called historic justice.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have a thing called Western Stuff. So we start to turn around, and they understood that it's also sliding down the way of the friction for this thing that we're evaluate when you do it. Then next week, if you're still not working out, then also we're going to reach out to you.
But we did it for the after.
That's not happening. What's happening is no consequences. So, no, because they're afraid of the numbers. We're so new. The numbers are down.
What other,
So it's on the ADA.
what other things can I do?
Yeah, you can also use things like the spam and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I keep watching that. I know what's
What
going
women
on.
are in the company?
Less likely than.
Yeah.
That's what we do is like
The president or whatever is,
this last one's actually very tough running, so how we do your culture is mad, so we actually lost in the first round.
it's probably
Like now, like
That's
rap.
my whole thing, is big enough that
Literally,
there's already
it was happening. I want to get back to at least 2 hours. So like, I'm very close, I'm not.
Well, I
And I think we're trying to sit out, so like the whole.
Lead teachers,
Say it's for like 9:40, like 3.
they teach better, teach better.
You have like
As
2
if they were
hours.
authoritative.
Trying to get it out.
I just get people coming like you like 2 major things a day. My lesson plan, gonna be like a lesson plan and note if there's a department problem, like the conference or integrate.
Has similar experience.
Organize papers, throw up my desk. And then, so and then like another thing I can do is. And you won't have to pay for.
No, the thesis is, you know, basically judgments, we take
And like this week, I'm not thinking,
I might not have it.
kids. What do you think? On Monday, I was like,
I literally was.
It's in COVID. We're gonna have that program.
School's out. It was like 3:30.
You have to have
You know, how much stuff on, like, the test. What test?
No, well, because, yeah, it's like.
That's right, yeah, it's like, yeah, well, yeah, you're definitely, like, snap. Like, what? Oh, I couldn't tell, I was like, no worries, I was just joking around. All right, so you guys are in the back of my room. I go to like print off the original, you need a test. You're stupid things, I'm sure it's wrong. All right, guys, just take your test.
So what's good?
An hour of the day.
There's like a little concern
One of my classes.
There's my literature about that week, my instructions that you. And all that next day. I spent like an hour making versions out.
So on the way back, I go to class.
And then some how to say that we're on the computer.
Also,
So
anyways, I got the bus, and it's like, hold on. Second part again. And it's, you know, he's nice, so he's like talking to us. You know, and I'm like, what instructions these are fine, like clear out. So he's talking number one is literally number one. And I was kind of like, you know, so
So the whole thing is like you open up B1 and then you open up B2. Because that's like, I didn't.
I mean, it's good.
You just told me, I said, I'm used to it.
Oh, I get off that today.
And you're just like, I hate doing this.
And now I'm so the
I have like.
I know my but the rest of that's great. I know, I was just, that's how I'm gonna.
Yeah, students do great and they just talk more to each other. And then it's also great, they also talk more to each other.
Oh, if anybody knows a science teacher, need a job.
Oh,
I'm fine.
And now they're.
Put in here.
Oh, no, like right now.
Oh.
Yeah, my daughter's school is still looking.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, like.
They only have
Where's your daughter's school? Oh my gosh.
West LA.
Wait, what's first?
City Park.
Oh, yeah, that's a good school.
Yeah, I got them one. I got an increase feature, but it's still one story. It's up there, it's up there.
Good place.
Right next to the street level.
There's certain things now that I don't necessarily feel like I can do it. Right now that I'm right now, like,
Okay.
Same thing.
Well, let me talk more about this.
but I also feel like I've done, and I don't want to have to tell them not to write drawings. So,
This is have, some projects.
like minor things like that.
Drawings, quizzes, and.